Yes, we are. Yep, so look, we'll get underway. We are live streaming, and welcome to those who are joining us on live streaming. Welcome to the Infrastructure and Projects Committee public session today, the 8th of October. Welcome Ray Fife, Chair of the Bluff Community Board. Good to have you here, Ray, sitting in to provide some community input into our item 9, which is the wastewater consent for Bluff. So welcome, Ray. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. I have one apology from Councillor Pottinger.
Move.
Thank
Seconded.
you. Leslie and Darren, or Darren and Leslie, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Declarations of interest. Is there anyone that has?
Yes, I do. I will not comment on item 9.
And that's because of your Te Marama connection?
My Te Marama.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that, Evelyn. Do I have to move it? No. Okay. Yeah, okay. We don't have anyone in public forum. Major late items, we just have one, which is the National Land Transport Program for 2024-2027 funding update, which Erin's going to present. Doug's not with us today, so Erin will present that. So can I have someone move and second? Thanks, Evelyn. Second and Barry. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, so the first, tab 4, minutes to the Waste Group Advisory Meeting on the 15th of July. Can I have someone move? Thanks, Barry. Second, Darren. Any questions or points of clarification regarding those minutes?
Seconding's pro forma.
Yes, noting that. No, there being none, we'll accept those. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Minutes of the Infrastructure and Projects Committee held on the 3rd of September. I can move them from the chair if I could have a seconder. Thanks, Pania. Any discussion or points of clarification on those minutes? No? Okay. There being none, will all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Going good for the chocolate, Darren. Tab 6, which is the proposed road names for 59, 67 and 81 Lawn Dacre Road. Who's presenting? Patricia's going to. Thank you, Patricia.
Afternoon, councillors. This is really quite a simple request for a right-of-way naming. This has followed the process where feedback was sought from Waihopai for an appropriate name, and that feedback has been taken into account by the applicant. And their preferred, they have given 3 options, and their preferred is Rangatea Rise.
Rangiatia.
Thanks, Evelyn. And that's what's been proposed by staff. Any questions?
Chair, it meets the right criteria. I'm happy to move the 2 recommendations.
Yeah, happy to move.
second that.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. Is there any discussion with regard to that? Just a comment I have. I think you've just explained sort of the rationale and the reasoning, and also the significance of the naming as well. I think the paper covers that really well, so thank you for that. It gives us good direction. No. The only question I had, which isn't probably related to the naming, and it's probably a historical thing, but that would be classed as productive land now, wouldn't it, that subdivision?
That would be a question I would raise over to Mr. Shaw. That's outside my realm of knowledge.
Different levels of productive land, Chair. It's not level 3.
It's not level 3. That's why it fits. Right, yeah. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Right, I've got a mover and a seconder. No final questions. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Patricia. The road closures for the night food market event on the 23rd of November.
Chair, if I may, it's really nice to see that this event has been moved to Esk Street. Thank you to Great South for listening to the feedback from Council.
Erin?
Thank you, Chair. I think between yourself and Councillor Ludlow, those were probably the key statements that I wanted to make in relation to this paper. So nothing further to add from me, and happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I just had one, which was, with this approval, noting that we previously approved this and then Weather intervened with it, should the paper cover off a reserve date, so if it does get cancelled again, they don't have to come back, they've automatically got a reserve date they can go to without coming back to us, or is that not able to happen? I mean, moving forward, I know it's not in this
I'd
paper.
expect that that's something that we should be able to do. I'd get the guys to double check the legislation, but I expect that we could do that for future events going forward. Ask them if they'd like to put forward an alternative date to make it easier if they do need to move the event.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it just
Good
makes
idea.
sense and saves a bit of paperwork, and
Yeah.
it can happen. I know global warming's a real thing, but it can happen. So,
Call it climate change, doesn't feel that warm.
yeah, that's right. Okay. Right, any other points of... Yes, Steve?
Just quickly, I love the night food market, enjoy it. I just wanted to make sure that in terms of consulting with some of the vendors in East Street Eats and maybe wider East Street, is there firstly conversations happening, and is there a degree of support for this? I can see that some businesses would love the foot traffic and see the overflow opportunities. Some might be, against it in terms of poaching business. I just wondered what conversations were being had.
It's not something that we've been advised of by Great South at this stage. Obviously, they make all the surrounding businesses aware of the event happening, but I haven't heard specifically what the food vendor businesses' response has been. So that's something that we can ask Great South to provide us some feedback on.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Panian?
I know, that's right.
Thank you. Alan?
Well, being one of those vendors myself, I'm sure we and most of us would like it, and I'm sure we would like it. We'd like it better in East Street than in Don Street, because if you get a couple of thousand people there and they're in Don Street, that's a long way away. If they're in East Street, they're there, and it's up to us then to attract them into our own businesses. So I'm sure pretty much would all prefer East Street, yeah. If it makes any sense.
Just make sure that conversation's been had,
Yeah.
I guess.
Darren?
Is that a declaration, Councillor? Most of the night food markets don't have the types of foods that conflict with what are in Esk Eats at the moment, and from the event that I was involved with back in Waitangi Day, the mall and surrounding businesses experienced a great increase in activity just from the sheer increase of numbers of people circulating.
Yeah.
And to be fair, it wasn't that far away through in Don Street, but it just makes more sense to have it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Good as gold. Evelyn?
Have you got to move it for the recommendation?
Not yet, but you're going to.
Then I did.
Yeah.
5.
And I was going to second it, but I just wanted to comment that my experience when the Don Street event was that not everybody found what they wanted, or it wasn't always available by the time they got to the thing. So seems to me a better synergy in East Street, and that was why I raised the question at the last meeting. So I'll happily support the recommendation, and with Councillor Ludlow's kind offer to be his support person this time. I do think I see the synergy, and I'm delighted to see Esk Street being used as we envisaged it might be. So thank you.
Trish?
No, I was going to second it as well.
Okay. So I've got Darren moving and Evelyn seconding. Any final comment or question? No. There being none, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Local would have done well. Update. Andrew?
Good afternoon, everyone. Right, so just feels last time we met was back on the 3rd of September, where we stepped through the information that was released by the DIA. They, so on the 8th of August from memory, they released a stack of fact sheets, guidelines, templates, and we went through all that documentation and summarised it for this group. And at that session, we committed to providing a delivery plan for what is the process that we need to follow through as ICC to respond to the legislation. And there was a request as well for workshops for councillors to start to engage with the content. So those purpose of today is really just step through the approach that we've put together, provide a view of the plan, and some of the costs and resource implications associated with that plan, and looking for your endorsement to that plan to progress. There's a presentation, hopefully. If not, it's in papers, so sorry, I put you on the spot. And happy, oh no, I'll run through it and then take questions at the end.
You're going to go through this, Andrew?
Sure thing. Okay.
Can you just talk closer to the mic, please?
I have to bring the chair closer. Straight. There we go. Okay, so just things we want to touch on today, the ICC approach to local water done well, and then we've got an update from the Otago Southland Working Group as well, so touch on both of those. So in terms of approach, and this follows the DIA guidelines and recommendations as to how council should approach local water done well. Those first two bullets there, develop that baseline current water services delivery and projected activities, so just use your LTPs to start to inform your water services delivery plan and populating that content, basically doing that stock take. So we've formed a team and that work is underway at the present, and then we've set up workshops for, I'm not sure if you've seen them appear in your diaries, hopefully you have, 12th of November and the 3rd of December. Those are the two council workshop sessions where we're looking to really progress the next few bullets. So proposing to follow the better business case methodology, so defining investment objectives up front, so we're all super clear on what does success look like for ICC, and then follow on through that, look at the options analysis and options that are on the table, and they'll be coming both from the Otago Southland work, potentially Selwyn, but less likely so, and then our own analysis.
Just the piece that I'd add to that is that that better business case stuff can be stuff that takes a significant amount of time and effort to put together. We're not proposing to spend huge amounts of time on it because I think it's something that through the previous work we've been doing on the previous versions of reform, the work that the Otago Southland group have done, I'm not expecting that our objectives will be vastly different to what we're seeing nationally or what we're seeing across Otago Southland. So we'll use that as a starting point and then essentially just look with the council's agreement to tweak that to make it specific to Invercargill City. So that'll allow us to progress through that reasonably at pace, but I'm really conscious of this is work that's going to need to survive us going into a new political term. So we really need to make sure that we're all agreed on what we want to achieve, what those objectives are, so that we can make sure that we keep the process true to that when potentially council may have others who are coming in fresh and essentially saying, why didn't we look at this, why didn't we look at that? We'll have a nice clear process to step through where we've been.
Good additional explanation. So looking to, basically the target is to try and select the options that we are looking to take out for public consultation by the end of the year, which is, call it a stretch target, but when you look at the plan on the next slide, you'll see that it's something that we very much want to try and front load this plan, get those options on the table, and then take out to consultation. So if just to have that contingency down the back end of the plan. I think I've talked about one point I've just skipped over, proceeding, go back. The aim is to align the consultation on local water done well with the annual plan consultation period. So we're really just trying to I guess, get more bang for the buck, and it's a logical alignment. One will influence the other, so better to do both at the same time. And yeah, just that last point in terms of front loading, target is to have that Chief Executive endorsed and Council approved plan by the end of June. That provides that 8 weeks of contingency, so just really keen to guard that contingency jealously, because could be really important for us. Oops, wrong way. Okay, it's really hard to see, but you've got a copy of the plan, and basically what I've just described is shown there in that plan, with the period of options analysis occurring up until December. Apologies, it's so small. Just use your screens. Options analysis up to December, putting together the decision paper in the early part of the new year, and consultation materials that will go out, options analysis and consultation materials, aligning that consultation period through March and the back end of April, front end of April, with the annual plan, time for council hearings, deliberations, and then arriving at a decision. So it's easy on paper, but that's going to be quite a process. Just move to the next slide. Hit the right button again. Just in terms of the resourcing that we anticipate is required. Of course, internal resourcing, infrastructure, finance, and policy team members. It's going to be, it's phrased as a mini LTP, so it's going to be quite a resource drain. External consulting support. We're looking for Morrison Lowe to help us out with the ICC loan modelling. So that's going to be important to marry that up against the Otago Southland views. External legal support anticipated, and then some external CCO subject matter expert support as well, if it's needed. All of that comes at a cost, so we've tried to be conservative, and noted as well that there's the option to maybe options to swap out external resource for internal resource. So it's very high level, it's very chunky estimate, and that will need to be refined as we go through the next few months. But it's like a placeholder for the present. In terms of funding options, we've got the Better Off funding, which just from last check was approximately 450k. So look for a process to allocate that towards this work. Pause there. Just that's the ICC process. From here, I just go into a quick update on Otago Southland. Just do that. I'll just keep this super brief. So in terms of the Otago Southland work, Morrison Lowe delivered the first cut of financial modelling on Friday, and that's now that's being presented today to the CFOs for the first time, and is going through to the chief executives for the end of this week. So that's the first time we've seen two of the sort of base case modelling completed. So councils stand alone and on a comparison on a like-for-like basis, and then the modelling for everyone rolled up into a water services CCO. So that information's drafted. It's been going through a review process, and then we'll look to share that out through the chief executives and mayoral forums as soon as we're able to help inform council views. But that's what's going on there. From a delivery model perspective, we also have our quick wins, which were plotted, but the focus, to be honest, is not so much on those. There is value in them, and there is stuff that we can do now, so we'll be presenting that to the chief executives on Friday as well. Nothing else worth covering off? Touching on the Selwyn offer? No?
Okay.
Take
Questions?
questions.
Tom?
When we look at the delivery options, I know that we're going to look at standalone, and I know also that because we're already into it, we're looking at the joint Southland Otago model. Are we going to model a Southland alone model?
I would expect so, yes. We expect to get direction to that effect from the chief executives on Friday. We're set up to do it within the Otago Southland work, but we've also, within the proposal for Morrison Low, have that price for them to deliver for the ICC alone. So the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Nobby, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions.
Can you speak up to that mic, please?
Oh, sorry. Under option 4, there's a statement that says the entity is unlikely to be able to borrow in its own right. Now, that's not my understanding of what we've been told by DIA. They said that we could, option 4 structure could borrow against its water revenue. So I just want to confirm that Erin nodded ahead to that.
I'm happy to speak to that. I think the words that Andrew has put up is the standard words that we're getting out of the DIA correspondence, which does talk about that generally entities wouldn't borrow in their own right. That's because, as I understand it, DIA aren't expecting that entities would be bringing in their own revenue, or that they would. They haven't looked at the option where potentially the assets are leased to an entity, and therefore that they would actually have a requirement to upgrade, to raise revenue to upgrade assets. It is a question, you're correct in that I have put to the local government funding agency to ask them if you had a management entity that brought in its own revenue and also had for example, a lease from the council to look after the assets on its behalf for 10 or 20 years, would the LGFA still lend to that entity? And at this stage, the LGFA had said yes. What was interesting though was DIA made the statement at the time that they were also very interested in the answer to that question, and I wondered whether they may update their guidance after that answer, but they haven't done that, which means I'm just wondering whether they may look to prohibit councils from doing that in some way through the legislation, but we'll need to wait and see as that evolves.
And the other question, or more of a statement really, is around the proposed approach at the very front end of the report that talks about conducting consultation. But Andrew, when he spoke, he actually said community consultation. I think that's important to have that in, because consultation means many things to many people. And certainly local water done well is something you'd want the community to know about. Interesting that the DIA said that when we have to consult, we don't have a choice on that. They said that we only need to consult on 2 options. We need to give the community 2 options. So I just want that clear as well, that we don't. There's no expectations that we'll consult on all 6 options. I just think that would muddy the water and people would have no idea which ones to go to.
Thank you. I've got a couple of 3 questions. Well, firstly, governance. So the governance of this is happening through the mayors and the CEs in terms of where the reporting lines are coming back through, and then it'll come through this committee and up through to councils.
Yeah, so it depends on which piece you're talking about. If you're talking about the Otago Southland work, then that is reported through the chief executives and the mayoral forum, and then obviously Andrew comes and provides an update on how that work's going, seeks feedback, etc. When it comes to the Invercargill City alone, then that'll be a traditional process through Michael and myself into council and taking direction from council. Now, the Otago Southland work ends currently in November. So at the moment that those sort of final models are being put together around whether an Otago Southland model is viable. I think, as Andrew advised, there's already been some early, the first draft of that has come through, and having had a very brief look at that, I don't think there's any surprises there, that we always suspected that this wouldn't work for Invercargill, and nothing unexpected has come through in that, but we'll obviously work through getting that finalised, make sure that all of the councils are happy with their data before we bring that final version through to council for review, but that'll absolutely come up through council.
So the sort of 3 touches of council will be workshop, then will it come through to infrastructure and then go to council, or will it just be workshop through to council?
So at this stage it will be they'll be going through the infrastructure committee and then through to council.
Yeah, after workshops.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
Sorry, Chair. Infrastructure committee workshop, then infrastructure committee meeting, then through to the council meeting
Yeah.
to confirm the minutes.
Yeah, because and why I ask, I think it's really important because it's a really significant issue for this council and our community, and so I think we need more than just a lot. Yeah, and I know that's not what's proposed, but the more touches we get of this and the deeper understanding and more time to have a bit of a hui and really nail this, the better, I think. So that's good. Secondly, just their work program. It's busy. It's probably a Michael question in terms of resourcing. Like, it's a busy program and everything else that's happening in council. Like, are we comfortable that this phases with our other work streams to enable us to get the quality of time we need on this really important piece of work?
Through yourself, Chair, that's a very difficult question to answer on the spot. Having said that, do I feel that we've got the right resources to be able to do the job? Yes, I do. Do I feel as though they're a time pool? Yes, they are. This is a capacity and a priority issue that we need to address as an ELT, and we are doing that on a routinely process. But in relation to the question of have we got enough resources, there's not enough around the country to actually do this work. So we're managing with what we've got available. Yeah,
which goes to my last point around funding. So I think we were asked by central government to commit any leftover better off funding to the project, to this work stream. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, but we're going to be short in that though, aren't we, in terms of the cost of it to us? So we won't have enough funding to cover the cost of doing this?
In the short term, no. In the longer term, we will need to come back to this committee and then through to council in relation to funding impacts associated to that. We'll see how we can manage that within resources, but there is a likelihood we will need to come back in an annual plan cycle in relation to funding requirements.
Yeah, so hopefully, Mayor Clark, you're sort of continuing to bang the drum of, we got told at a local, a recent conference in Wellington about what we should do. Well, maybe we should give some feedback to central government around what they should do.
Good luck with that.
With my request as chair of this committee.
Sorry, Chair, the only other piece I'd add is we have got 2 workshops in there for the Infrastructure Committee's time. Just note that the committee, you are also time poor as a group in terms of everything else that you have got going on. So we have been able to get 2 workshops in with you, but at the moment that is all that we've been able to have of your time.
Yeah, no, it's... Evelyn and then Nobby.
Got ESP. This is a slightly off the wall question, but with the Otago Southland work that you did, did any of that have benefit during the recent rain events in terms of your awareness of what people would need in terms of infrastructure support? Because I'm just really aware that we've been asking the question, it's all about mostly focused on fresh water, but in local water's done well as the other water streams as well. Did the work that you did it highlight some other things that that councils were able to use during the water events, the flood events?
I think what I'd say is that it highlighted what I think councils have already known in terms of the challenges of the investment that's needed in that space, and the fact that when you do get hit with one of these large events, that many regions' infrastructure simply isn't coping and therefore requires significant investment into it. And I think for the most part those councils that were hit have been saying that they need to invest significantly, and that's obviously challenging from a financial perspective. What I would say that the work has done both as part of the previous iteration of reform and the current work, is that it's certainly brought the officer level staff closer together to be talking about how we can work better together, how we can pick up the phone more often and create those relationships. We weren't as heavily impacted this time, but obviously when we experienced the events earlier in the year, there was a much closer connection between Invercargill City and Gore District than what would have previously been there. So I think those are some of the key benefits. And I think depending on which way things go, I think conversations about how we share resources around things like the laboratory that we have in Invercargill and things like that, around why would other councils send their results to the North Island and wait 2 days for their results rather than sending their results down to Invercargill. Things like that, I think, are work that'll continue out of this, I would hope, off the back of those connections that have been formed.
So there have been some gains out of this process. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Mayor Clark?
So just to your point that you raised before, Chair, about us having 2 infrastructure workshops, followed by a formal committee meeting, followed by full council. So at what stage do we consult with the community?
I'm happy to take that one, Chair. So at the moment, the consultation with the community would be after council has formed a view around those options that council would like to consult on, and we're looking to align that with the annual plan, which I believe we're looking to go out in March.
Yeah,
That's correct,
March,
Andrew?
yeah.
March next year. So that is, to the Chair's point, a very tight timeline for us to workshop with council all of the potential options you would like to explore, do the modelling for those options, and bring that back ready with a preferred option or preferred options for council to go out and consult with. So we will be hard up against it, but we will do our best to hit those dates.
Is that it? Yep.
No, I just want to be clear on that. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation in some ways. We can't go out and consult until we've decided what our 2 preferred options are, and we have to have 2, not 1. So what I'm hearing is that decision will not be made by full council until March. So the consultation will be after March.
No, I think the
consultation will be in March,
Yeah.
and so the actual decision by council, I believe, would be in February. Is that
Okay.
correct, Andrew?
Yep,
Yeah.
thank you.
In terms of the options.
Yeah.
Tom?
I guess another issue around that, in terms of timing for consultation, is that if we are going to provide 2 models, other than standalone, those other models require others to tango,
It does.
2 tango, 5 to tango, 7 to tango, or whatever. So you've got to have those councils with their ducks in line as well and asking the same question, which, to be honest, seems very, very unlikely to me at this point. I just don't see a pathway through to that point. One thing I do know is just a slightly separate question. Our aversion to ownership CCO is based on the concern we have about ending up sharing the debt of others who are far more indebted than we are. But I do notice that on the paper under option 5, it does say there are options to differentiate water charges and to maintain debt by scheme or district, which would imply that you could actually ring fence that debt so that you don't actually end up with a shared debt in that model. So I think that's, I'm not saying a misunderstanding on our part, but that's some clarity coming through.
Yeah.
So I think it's one thing that I'd be really keen for you to be doing as you're preparing, say, for the next workshop, is just to see what else is published in that and whether it's as straightforward
Yeah,
as seems to be described.
You're
there.
absolutely right there. There tends to be that aversion to asset owning CCO because people think that automatically means cost share and cross subsidisation. But you're absolutely right, Deputy Mayor, that that doesn't necessarily mean that the costs of a particular area can't stick with that area and things be carved out under that asset owning model as well.
That's it. Okay. Any final questions? Okay, thanks Andrew and Erin for the paper. Can I have a move and a second to receive and approve the proposed approach, delivery timeframes and associated budget estimates as detailed on the paper?
I'll move.
Thanks Leslie, seconded. Thanks Tom. Any final comment? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, item 9, Bluff wastewater consent best practicable option. Erin.
Thank you, Chair. And Liz, can we bring up the presentation, please? Thank you. So much of this presentation is content that has already been provided through the workshop that we held with the committee. However, I'm very conscious of the fact that this is quite a big issue. It's one that we haven't dealt with before, so I want to make sure that we keep having as much opportunity as possible to talk through this and make sure that everybody is as clear as possible around the various different elements of the conversation. On screen, I've also got a number of the project team supporting here today, which I'll be deferring to as well throughout the process. We've got Alistair Snow, who was here the other day as the project manager. We've got Andrew Collins, for who you've heard before from a planning perspective. Jim Bradley, who is our engineering support. We've also got Brendan Watts, who is on as well, who is standing in for Jeanette Campbell from a legal perspective if we do have any questions around the legals. And I can't see there, do we have Riria on as well? Possibly not. Riria from Tammy was going to get on if she could, but looks like she may not have been able to get on at this stage. So as we've worked through previously, a project vision and objectives was put forward for the Bluff wastewater project. As you're all aware, the consent for Bluff's discharge currently to the coastal marine area at Bluff expires next year, at the end of next year. What the project was set up to do was essentially to develop an analysis of options and a consent preparation through for a new consent to be lodged by the middle of next year to ensure that we hit that 6-month threshold to keep the consent current. As you'll see there, the vision of the project was around meeting the Bluffs community's current and future wastewater servicing needs and working with iwi and stakeholders to determine the best practicable option as defined under the Resource Management Act. The objectives in particular were around providing safe and reliable discharge, to provide a discharge solution that was achievable, affordable and deliverable in terms of something that we could actually do, to reflect a partnership process through our charter with Te Ao Marama, and also to ensure that we had meaningful and constructive consultation with the community and other key stakeholders. The best practicable option process is defined under the Resource Management Act. I think one of the key things that I've learnt through this process is it isn't always the best, the best practicable option, is actually defined under the RMA in terms of that practicable. And that talks to the nature of the discharge and the sensitivity of the receiving environment, the financial implications and effect on the environment, and the current state of the technical knowledge and likelihood of that option being applied. There's been a series of technical reports that have supported the work that we've been doing, and as the committee is aware, we have put together a technical working group to support the process as we've worked through these options, and a number of reports from the affordability assessments, natural hazard reports, flows and load reports, etc., have all been undertaken to support the work that we've been doing. all of those pieces of information have essentially been put into what we can call a large sieving process, where we started with a very long list of options of potential ways that we could achieve a discharge consent in Bluff, and those have essentially been narrowed down throughout this process till we got to a final shortlist of options, and that final shortlist of options was assessed against a multi-criteria analysis and weightings that have previously been through the committee, and that came out essentially with a preferred option at the end of that process, which is the option 1F, which was the option that was recommended by that technical working group. There's just some more detail provided there around the scoring of those various different options. I think actually now we're in these slides, I'm probably just about jumping into Andrew's piece. So Andrew, I might hand over to you and get you to just take the group back through that information in terms of the technical working group process and how we've arrived at that final shortlist of options and preferred option from the technical working group.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. Thanks Erin. So I can't quite see on the screen, but I've got a copy up on another screen, so if you see me looking up, that's what I'm doing. Well, we're really probably on the next slide, is the summary against those various criteria which were matched to that best practicable option definition in the Resource Management Act. So that's how the various people within the working party that were assigned to score the various criteria ended up scoring those options. And previously on the prior slide, additionally the working group had been asked to go back and assess the status quo option in terms of certainly all the capital cost, operating cost, and that's on that previous slide that you just saw. That was the grey column. Maybe quickly go to it. That's that grey column second to the left. So back to the evaluation, the scoring came out, and then the slide after this shows a number of sensitivity tests that were done with different weighting scenarios. So it's very small legend at the bottom, but maybe if I can help out, the preliminary scoring with the light blue bars to the left, followed by, so I wasn't prepared to speak to the slide, the alterated equal weight scenario, the blue, the darker blue.
I think, Andrew, it's probably easier just to speak to the fact that at a high level that what we did do with the weightings of the scores was that, and Andrew, jump in with anything, was that we applied what would happen if we gave affordability a higher score versus we gave cultural considerations a higher score versus we gave environmental considerations a higher score, just to see what would happen as to whether that completely changed the outcome. And what the working group found was that despite having a bit of a play with those weightings, the scenarios weren't really impacted by those changes in weightings. Is that fair to say, Andrew?
Yep, thanks, Aaron. That's actually right.
What's the green bar determine?
So the green one was when the weighting for the financial was pushed right up to 60%, and others were dropped accordingly. So that was the most heavily weighted to financial, that one.
Right, thank you. Is there any, just on that slide, because it's quite an important slide that, so is it relating to this slide?
No, actually, I'd like to go back to the previous one.
Well, no, just on this slide, we'll take this slide and then we'll come back to the general discussion. Yeah, okay, keep going.
So I think we'll probably be moving on from that slide now, Andrew.
Okay, happy to come back for any questions. So on the slide there now, the working group, which comprised members of Council's operational team, Te Ao Marama Incorporated representing Awarua Runanga, Stantec as the engineering advisors, myself as a planning advisor. Public health had been involved earlier on but not in the final workshop, but they indicated they were satisfied with the working papers. So they were the working group, and the recommendation following the workshop on the 11th of September is that option 1F be the preferred option for BPO. And there were a range of reasons for that. I've listed them on the screen in no particular order, but it seemed to be affordable. This is 1F, which is the status quo treatment, but with just below the treatment plant a naturalistic wetland prior to discharge through the existing, albeit upgraded, outfall. So that was seen as affordable from the cost estimates that have been provided by Stantec, and also through the lens provided by the utility report looking at affordability. Secondly, the discharge of the treated wastewater to land, which had been a strong preference of the iwi representatives. Following the process, that was seen as not being practicable in these particular circumstances relating to Bluff, and that was therefore rejected for affordability, engineering, feasibility and environmental reasons in the end. The 1F was seen as a better cultural outcome than the status quo, and that it forms the post-treatment land contact prior to discharge to the marine environment, which from a cultural perspective was a superior outcome. And then on the next slide, are we there? Development of the wetland area was seen as providing some sort of complementary environmental or more biodiversity enhancement through planting aspects. From a planning perspective, there are some policies in a suite of documents from the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement through the regional policy statement and then the Southland Coastal Plan, which talk about the post-treatment land contact prior to discharge, and that any other option with more direct discharge would need to be informed by consultation, and the actual words are that there's been consultation with tangata whenua in accordance with tikanga Māori and due weight given under those sections 6, 7 and 8 of the Act. That's the policy in the Regional Coastal Plan, which is preferring the contact with land prior to treatment and before going to the coastal environment. And then there's a coastal policy statement direction which as national policy carries very considerable weight. And in that case, it says that the discharge of treated human waste water in the coastal environment shall not occur unless there's been adequate consideration of alternative methods, sites and routes, and secondly, it's been informed by an understanding of tangata whenua values and effects. So those policies were under consideration of those. Option 1F was considered more consistent than the status quo, and for that reason, leading on to point 6 there, the working group anticipated that the consent process, particularly if it was endorsed by a written statement of support from iwi, would be considerably more straightforward for 1F than it would be expected to be for the status quo, where their position was very well known. Lastly, but very importantly, the engineering advice is that this is a practical option. There will be the need for some further investigation and concept design before it goes further to any application if this is your decision. But the working group is confident that a practical engineering solution and practical consent conditions can be achieved. And there are lots of examples of post-wastewater plants wetlands around the country. So the next steps are then to recommend it to yourselves as decision makers, and that is the working group's recommendation. I think the next slide.
I don't think we need to talk through that one in detail, Andrew. I think it's just, it provides those options up there so that we can talk through them if we need to. So thank you for that, Andrew. I think the other piece that I would just like to provide the committee with an update on was that at the workshop we had some advice around the Resource Management Act pathway versus the fast track consent pathway. Some of you may be aware that we have just received advice with the publishing of the fast track legislation that the Bluff wastewater consent has not made the cut in terms of the fast track legislation. So essentially we had previously been asked whether we would consider, if Bluff didn't make Schedule 1, whether we would consider it being added to Schedule 2. What has come out, we're not quite sure of the reason why, is that Schedule 2 has not been proceeded with and only Schedule 1 projects have come into legislation. Now we weren't aware that we were still in the running for alternative water to be on Schedule 1. Schedule 1 has listed the alternative water project, but as there was no Schedule 2, Bluff wastewater has not made the legislation at this stage for the fast track consent process. That doesn't mean that it is excluded from the process. You can still apply for it to go through the fast track process. However, I would expect that it's probably unlikely that they'll be considering to take on additional projects in the near future, that they'll be looking to prioritise those Schedule 1 projects for consideration by the committee, and I expect there's probably going to be a stand down period before they take on further projects. But again, it's a bit uncertain in that space. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But that was a little bit of a surprise to us. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions on the paper.
Just on that, were there any wastewater consents in Schedule 1? Of the fast track?
There was. So I wondered if all of the wastewater consents had simply been removed, but no, Far North District Council had one that was on. Right. There weren't a lot of council projects on. I think when I had a quick look through the list, there was only about half a dozen council projects at all. So we were lucky to make the cut with one. But yeah, it wasn't that they'd simply excluded all wastewater, because there was one there.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I've got Tom and Barry, and then Nolly.
Thanks. Erin, can you just confirm whether all stakeholders have formally supported 1F? So that includes Bluff and Diranunga, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm just looking for Ray.
Yeah, I'm here.
So I'm happy for. I was going
to
to say. So I think probably first, if we ask Ray to speak to the Bluff Community Board's piece, and then we can talk through the other stakeholders as well.
Yep, way Gary.
Okay, firstly I thank you for giving me the opportunity here to speak today, and acknowledge everyone around in this room today and those who are here via Zoom as well. The Bluff Community Board has given serious consideration to the shortlisted options presented to a Community Board wastewater consent workshop. And arising from that, we support option 1F, which is the existing system with 100% flow through surface flow wetland, which the working group and the governance group has recommended as well. Careful consideration was given to what would be the best practicable option in relation to the discharge of a contaminant, the nature of the discharge, along with the financial implications and the effects on the environment. 1F is affordable, in line with cultural needs, and deliverable. There is a need that the plan is sustainable management of our region's environment and for the social, cultural, economic, environmental needs of our community. We have taken into account the community's affiliation to Ranaka, the relationship of tangata whenua and the culture, traditions, values with their ancestral land, water and other issues. We're considering all significant decisions in relation to land or water bodies, therefore we support their submission as well. There are some issues that we would need further investigation on and to be considered is regarding the wetland, further investigation to the wetland to ensure that the vulnerability regarding environmental issues. Further, constant monitoring of the seawater in Kaimoana and reported on a regular basis. That the discharge falls in line with all regulatory acts. That no consideration be given to utilising the government's proposed fast-tracking bill, as we may face environmental concerns that must go through a robust, transparent process. That the current UV light system in place, which is nearing its used by date, be replaced with a more updated system that is even more effective in killing the bacteria. Further possible pipe extension. So there are a number of issues that we are concerned with and was raised with the community board members when we talked about it. And we'd just finally would like to thank all those who participated in the consultation process for a big issue in our community and that have deliberated on all options and reached consensus on. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Okay,
Thank
so
you,
we'll
Ray.
take.
And I can speak to the other elements of the stakeholders. So both Te Ao Marama and Awarua Runanga have both provided in writing support for option 1F.
Okay, so questions, Tom?
Sorry, just going back to the comments from Bluff Community Board. You said that you supported 1F, but then listed a kind of additional set of criteria. I wasn't quite sure whether you were saying that your support for 1F was dependent upon those or not.
It is what we can, our criteria is what we believe that need to be considered and, if possible, on all the issues that need to be further investigated can be achieved within the scope of affordability and probably in some instances with regulatory position as well as what may be required with the Coastal Management Act as well. So and I've probably looked at the ongoing yearly cost at $210,000. We as a community board thought that was quite excessive, and we have asked the question and probably need further answers on that, because if it was a wetland, it'd be a natural wetland, and we're just not quite sure what the added cost per year would be needed to that. We believe it probably quite significantly lower than the estimated cost, annual cost.
Okay, so sorry, without putting words in your mouth, it's you support 1F, but there's a sort of list of things that you're saying, please consider?
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Okay, yep, that's it, Tom. Any question, other questions? No.
Yeah.
Barry, and then
As
Nobby.
far as 1F goes, like the present system, is 1A been taken off the books completely? It just can't be done. Like that, the system that's working now is really efficient. Is there any proof that 1F is going to be more efficient or a whole lot less efficient than the present system?
1A wasn't removed from the shortlist by the working group due to efficiencies or function of the current 1A option. It was removed due to the opposition from iwi, meaning that there was a highly uncertain consenting pathway. So just because the Regional Council approved the current option close to 25 years ago, doesn't necessarily mean that they would approve the status quo again. In fact, all the advice that we've had is that it is highly unlikely that they would approve the status quo again. So based on the planning advice that the team have had, based on the legal advice that we have had around what's happening in terms of approval from regional councils, and particularly approval from regional councils where a status quo is opposed by iwi, then it wasn't my view that I could make a recommendation to council to proceed with 1A, and similarly that the working group didn't make a recommendation to proceed with 1A.
So with that, are we just doing this increase to go through land just for cultural reasons?
We are doing the increase to give us the most likely consenting outcome, and a significant part of that is around how we partner with iwi.
Because I can guarantee there's a lot of ratepayers out there that will not be happy about this going down a cultural line.
Yeah. I need to make sure that council has a pathway that I believe can be consented. Now, at the end of the day, council can also take an option to take a higher risk consenting pathway, and I'll absolutely do my best to get that through, but it's not something that I can make as a recommendation.
Yeah, so I think what you're referencing there, and it is in the paper, so the particular references to the X, which is the regional coastal plan and the national coastal plan, is, you know, that what's informing that from what I take from the paper. Right. So, and I think that's important to take into consideration because they are acts of legislation. So, if you haven't read those, you probably should go and read them. Nobby.
I just wanted to go back to a couple of screens back. If you can work your way back, Aaron.
Summary.
No, the last one.
That one?
I need some understanding why the...
Can you speak into the mic, please?
I need some understanding, two things on that schedule. Why the working group has not included 1A, which was a requirement from council. It wasn't a discretionary option that you had. We reinserted 1A and it hasn't been included on that score by the specialist. And secondly, why 1F ranks at 3.5 and yet 1G on cultural grounds it's red marked at 1. So both are going via land, and I'd like some understanding around the, I guess, the group or the iwi's input into that group about why 1F is ranked so high in comparison to 1G.
So I might cover the first part of that question, and then I might ask Andrew, who was in the workshops, to talk to that distinction between 1F and 1G from the cultural scoring of the working group. So in terms of the request from council for the technical working group to consider option 1A, I requested that the technical working group did not need to include that as a shortlisted option because I wanted to keep their process quite separate from council, but I did ask the technical working group to develop the pricing and also to score it against the multi-criteria analysis. What the working group did was develop the costing side of it, and they considered whether to score it against the multi-criteria analysis, and Andrew may or may not want to add some more to this in a moment. However, the view of the working group was that they had when they reconsidered it, that they had chosen not to shortlist it for multi-criteria analysis for good reason, particularly in terms of that inconsistency with the national policy, and they didn't believe that anything had changed around that, so they elected not to score it. as the working group is made up of both internal but also external stakeholders, it wasn't a process that I could force the working group to score if they requested not to. I did ask them to give council a full picture, but they elected not to. So therefore what came back through to council was a summary of their views as to why it hadn't been shortlisted, as well as those full costings to be able to provide a comparison back to council. Andrew, did you have anything to add to that first one?
No, you summarised that well, but the working group did certainly consider the status quo a lot in that subsequent workshop. So there was good discussion before I finish answering that. The slide that's on there about the cultural scoring, that was scored by the Te Ao Marama reps themselves. It wasn't for other parties of the part of the working group to do their scoring. So different parts of the working group did the initial scoring for the various areas of specialty, I guess, and then it was discussed, moderated, agreed at the end. But the scoring, I suppose what I'm saying is that I'm not able to answer why 1F scored 3.5 and 1G scored a 1, but it was expressed to us very clearly that 1G was not a preferred option for Te Ao Marama, for Awaroa Runanga, and that the option was distinctly better from their perspective, and that's why they scored it as such. While the working group didn't go back, we listened to Aaron's advice. We didn't go back and actually score each one for status 1A, but we did revert to, I guess, the overall project objectives that had been up earlier on. The commitment from the outset to reflect a partnership process that meets the commitments of the Charter of Understanding between the Council and the Runanga, and that was one of the driving factors at the end as well.
So while I've got you there, Andrew,
Sure.
you might want to explain the comparison between 1F and 1G on financial grounds. So you've got, which I presume was not iwi, it would have been the panel. So it refers to 1F as being 4.6 and it refers to 1G being 5. Now, I don't have to be a rocket scientist in maths to work out that the total costing of 1G is 41% of the cost of 1F, and yet the differential you've got on the ratings here is hardly worth rating. So why isn't 1G significantly more than 1F on that rating system?
So I may have to defer to others, but my understanding is that the ones were assigned, basically it was a pro rata between the least expensive option and the most expensive options, being 3C1 of course, and that there was effectively a sliding scale.
It's frozen.
I think we may have had Andrew freeze there, but I'm happy to speak to that. I think if you were only comparing 1F and 1G in isolation with each other, you would expect to see a larger score difference. But when you were comparing them against the nearly $18 million, well, the whole of life cost of $39 million for 3C1, versus the whole of life cost for option 1F of 15 and the whole of life cost of 1G of 7.6, that's where they were scored closer together than what you perhaps would have seen if you were scoring them in isolation.
So what it's been taken across the range of all the options is
That's
what I
right.
hear from that. So it's the range is 7 to 39, I think you said,
Yeah.
did you? In terms of million. And so when you take it across that range versus the range of 7 against 15, which is nearly a 50% difference, that's where I hear you get a closer 4.6 versus 7. Does that make sense?
But But
I'm not
one-
saying I agree with it, I'm just saying that's the
But
rationale.
one option's twice as expensive as the other.
Yeah, but in the relativity of 15 against 39 versus 7.5 against 39, so you're comparing 7.5 against 39 versus 15 against 39 as opposed to 7.5 against 15 is what I take from what I've just heard.
That's right, Chair. And
that's why
also
you have
keeping in mind that there were a number of additional options that were more expensive again that were eliminated based on affordability.
Also like some understanding of why iwi have declined 1G.
I think that was the piece that Andrew advised that he couldn't necessarily speak to in terms of why they scored it as a 1 as opposed to a 3.5.
Not scoring. On the latest set of report that we've got, under 1G it says not accepted by iwi.
My understanding of it is simply that the land contact via rock channel is one that was seen as still having the negatives associated with a direct discharge to land without any of the positive environmental benefits that would be achieved via a wetland to the broader area.
So, through you, Chair, at the previous workshop, Aaron, you clearly stated to us, because I asked you this question specifically, and I've asked it to of you personally as well. You have said to me that 1G is a rock gully that does not increase the quality of the water that's discharged. Now, it doesn't increase it, which is okay, but 1F does have the potential to decrease the quality of the work. You've said that, and you said it comes from two things. One, the silt levels of when you run water through a wetlands, and two, the activity of birds in that area will interfere with the readings as well. So how can iwi or the report writers say that 1G is not deemed to be suitable, yet it doesn't change the quality going out through the pipe, which is the environmental factor, and yet, same breath, say that 1F is sort of the preferred option when it does actually lower the quality of what goes out. Given that Tammy, I assume, had some input into the shortlisting, which put both those options on the table, 1F and 1G.
So, and I'm happy I might get Andrew to add to this as well, but I think the key piece to keep in mind is that it's a multi-criteria analysis, which means that each of those elements up there is scored individually, and then we have a look at what the final outcome is and whether or not it makes sense or not. Whilst there is a risk, and it's, as I understand it, it's not a significant risk, but it's something that we would need to manage closely, of a slight reduction in the discharge quality of a wetland. And I'll be honest, a rock channel would be easier from a maintenance perspective from my team. However, we are conscious of that requirement both through legislation and through our partnership that we have with Te Ao Marama and our local runanga to include their wishes into part of that analysis as well, and that's what's been included through that scoring up there.
So again, going back to the last workshop, you heard me read out an email that came from Pania, who speaks on behalf of Arua, that clearly stated that there was to be no discharge to water or to ocean, none at all. And the two options that she threw up were a land option, which is not what we're talking about with 1F, or a pipe through the Clifton. So that has changed now on us, but are you telling us that in your report that 1F is supported by iwi, even though it has a detrimental environmental impact?
What I'm advising you is that it is supported by iwi, not to the full effect that a full land-based option would, but that it is supported by iwi through a mid-range score in the multi-criteria analysis, and the fact that that has then come out when scoring all options has come out as the highest scoring option, and that they support that outcome of the working group. Yes, and look, what I might do is I might just ask Jim, if you can just speak to, because I think what you have found around the country is that often parties will come together with very strong views at the beginning of a process, but then as you continue to work through that process, compromise has to come into it, and I think in your experience that's probably not unusual. Is that correct?
That is correct. Greetings all. That is correct, and we have many case histories in New Zealand, and the matter being discussed, we have had some cases where the land contact through the rock passage has been totally supported from a cultural point of view, but we have many other cases where various types of wetlands, including the naturalistic one that is part of 1F, have been adopted, often as a somewhat compromise, if I can use that word, but in terms of a roadmap along a journey with some goalposts further out, and bringing in the kind of holistic, naturalistic approach, the integration with natural wetlands, etc., has been seen by many as both a cultural and an environmental step forward. Yes, it is acknowledged that birds, pests, etc., can affect the water quality, that to some degree. We can also get, with the right type of planting and general arrangement, improvements in nutrient reduction, etc. So those things are all taken into account, and the fact that we have quite a number of these types of wetlands and variations of them consented around the country, and many of those have come from cultural considerations and the wider kind of environmental enhancement situation, notwithstanding the actual discharge itself. I hope that helps.
And I think the other piece that I'd add is that Te Ao Marama had very strong views coming into this process around only accepting a full land-based option. As the options have been worked through with the team, however, what they've found is that that land-based discharge isn't a practical option for Bluff, simply due to the fact that the lack of land that isn't rocky and the land that would be required to be flat in that area isn't there. There was also quite an aesthetic impact that would be in place if we went with that full land-based option. So that was what essentially changed their views through the process to move towards supporting a land contact option via wetland.
Yeah, so if I can just jump in here. So just want to clarify a couple of things I think that Andrew had said and also Jim's just said. So firstly, Jim, I think I heard you say that the model proposed under 1G has met the approval of iwi around the country, not all, but some.
Correct, some,
okay.
But not all, and others have said no, we want to go further than that.
Okay, and then so I think the important thing here for us to understand as a committee with a recommendation through the council is that, and I think it needs an explanation from if it's Te Marama or it's the Runanga, is that there's a significant difference in the cost here, 50% cost difference in 1F to 1G, both in capital, 50%, and then the whole of life is about 50%. The operating cost is through annual maintenance isn't 50%. I acknowledge that. So, you know, as chair, I'm not clear in my mind why a recommendation would be put through to council to support 1F with that variance of difference, given we've had a hearing what Jim said, that it does meet cultural assessment criteria and it has been approved in other areas. by iwi, and yet it's not acceptable to our runanga and our iwi. I think that needs a closer lens and a wider explanation, is my view of Chair, because the gap of 50% or, you know, $7 million over the whole of life, you know, needs an explanation in my view. So I think that's where the Mayor's sort of coming from. I'll be interested in other councillors' comments on that. We had Pani, did you still want to?
Sorry, Chair, I've still got some further questions, if you allow that.
Okay, righto. And then we've got Pani, then Leslie,
Yep.
and then
I had my hand up.
Trish, and then Tom. And then
So Andrew, earlier on in your presentation, you quoted the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, 23, brackets 2, brackets B. What you didn't disclose is what's in 23, 2A, and what was in 23, 2B2. And I think that leaves an inaccurate picture of what the actual coastal policy statement actually says. And then when we go through to the Southland Coastal Plan 2013, again, section 7329, when you look further into 3 to 10, you'll see that it requires us to have an understanding of the iwi expectations. It does not, under either of those two things, give iwi a veto right to say blankly, we don't agree with this, we don't agree with that. Well, it doesn't. And to make it even better, I've read the founding document for Tammy, and that says exactly the same thing. Quoted in this document, got it sitting there, and it says exactly the same thing. There's a partnership to work through values, but it doesn't mean that iwi can come in and just say that option's off the table, that option's off the table, that option's off the table.
yeah, I think. Yeah. Hang on, wait. Just wait. I take your point, Ola. Yeah, I think, you know, we've got to be careful about jumping to a conclusion of what, you know, the decision has been made by, you know, Te Marama in this case, where, you know, you've made that, whatever it is, assumption that it's been, you know, I think we've got to be cautious around that. I think we have to understand further, and that was where I was going to around, you know, we need to have a greater understanding of the reasons for support of option 1F versus 1G, right? What we've been told, and it may just be in the convenience of time that it's just not supported. I think because of the financial gap in this through capital, we need a wider lens across that. What is the thing we're missing here around why 1G is ranked as a 1 on cultural significance and 1F is 1 for a bit? Please be cautious around sort of assuming or allegations around what may have happened or may have not when we don't actually know that.
To that point, Chair, I asked specifically of the advisory panel what happened around this, and they said iwi rated one option 1 and one option 3.5, and in the report we have in front of us today in the appendix on page 6, and I'll read it for you because it's in one of the spreadsheets, it says under 1G,
so hang on, just to be
iwi
clear,
do not support.
So
that's all I said.
Page 47 of board books you're talking to?
Well, I'm looking at the spreadsheet.
6 of 9 of the...
6 of 9?
Yep.
Yep.
47 of board books.
Under 1G,
Yeah.
it says iwi does not support. So that's not me being outspoken, I'm just quoting the facts. That iwi has exercised their rights and been allowed to exercise those rights in a way that I don't think is appropriate to the discussion.
Yeah.
And a good example is the figures that are in some of the spreadsheets don't add up. You've already raised that. I sat at the last workshop and the Deputy Mayor raised the issue about why option 1F was costing 120,000 a year. The response to it is we've now got a report back 3 weeks later that says 210,000 a year. And Ray's raised that exact issue itself. Like, we don't have enough information on the table about some of that stuff. And my fear is that if we come out of this committee meeting with a recommendation of 1F, it'll go to full council in 3 weeks' time with no public consultation at all. Yeah. And the precedent it sets for me is, I mean, if it was up to me, I'd be 1A. But I know that I don't
It's
have...
not up to you.
Yeah, I understand that. So I'm now trying to understand why...
Yeah,
1G
I think that's the important thing
1G
you to
wasn't
understand.
there, because if 1G's not accepted by iwi,
Point of order, sorry. That sounded to me like a pretty predetermined outcome. If it was up to me,
I
I
know.
would be choosing option 1A.
well, that's all right. I'm entitled to say what,
Yeah, it's
what
an
option I
opinion,
prefer,
that's fine.
just as other people have their votes as well.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, if iwi do not support 1G at Bluff, is it reasonable to assume that when we get to Clifton, which Erin has already said starts next year, and 1G is not an option there, and there is not a big enough parcel of land to have 1F, are we back to a land-only option? Which for ratepayers...
Point of order,
it-
Mr Chair, this is mere speculation. We
Yeah,
are here
I
today
think
to
let's
discuss
just
the
state of this,
wastewater
not
consent.
get too far ahead of the thing.
Well, through you, Chair, I've raised this before. If people want to raise points of order, they have to quote standing orders. And
Yeah.
I don't know what I've breached in standing orders by raising the potential for this to set a precedent that affects the next consent that we have to deal with.
Yeah,
Because the cost of that is
so
200 million.
Yeah, so absolutely, I think the committee would acknowledge that there is a degree of precedent potentially with this decision. So Erin, just could you clarify?
I think there may have been some questions in there.
Yeah, well, I'm interested in the change from, I think it was 150 in the annual
Yeah.
maintenance on 1F to 210. Are you able to provide any?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the costs that were in the workshop were the costs as prepared by the external support team. When we've then have those costs go through our internal teams to make sure that they were happy with them, there were some cost changes with them. When it comes to option 1F, the key piece there is around the fact that we require an additional pump station to be in operation for that option. And so approximately half of the cost of that option is around the pump station maintenance, mechanical, electrical, power costs, etc., to have that option function. The actual wetland maintenance costs are only about, I think, about $40,000 per annum of that cost.
So just to get that clear, so with the wetland, there's an additional pump
Station that's required that isn't required for the
For the
rock
1G.
channel
Yeah.
or for the status quo option.
Okay. So there's some additional capital and also some additional maintenance.
The other piece that I would just say around the iwi support or not support, and I apologise if I don't quite get my words right here. In terms of, we've worked in partnership with iwi through this process, but iwi are also, I guess, a stakeholder in terms of they have a right to submit or not submit against this process once we put the consent in. What we've looked at the moment is the fact that if iwi support 1F, that is likely to give us a much smoother consenting pathway and therefore a lower cost consenting pathway. Now that doesn't mean that 1G can't be council's preferred option, and iwi not supporting it doesn't mean that we can't attempt to get a consent in that way. It simply means that if iwi then decide to oppose that as an option, it means that it will be a public hearing process and there'll be additional costs associated with that consenting option. Those costs are significant and therefore that's likely to somewhat close the gap in cost between those two options. Andrew, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'd probably have comments on some of the previous questions if need be, but I would agree with that statement, Erin.
Do you want to share those comments, Andrew?
I think I was asked about some of the policy side of things and whether I'd been selective. I certainly have been selective in the sense that there's a raft of policies and objectives that would be covered in any planning assessment. I've, for your benefit in this purpose, I just focused on some of the key ones. And the key message is certainly there is no right of veto. The Mayor is correct with that. There is no right of veto imposed by any of the legislation or the policies. They simply have made it clear that in anything to do with wastewater and the coastal environment, certainly in relation to freshwater as well, decisions of consideration of options and also in the ultimate decision making must be informed by an understanding of tangata whenua values and their cultural effects. So it's a case of being informed by them, not a right of veto. And in my work around the country on similar applications, I wouldn't say that this would be alone in, for example, the relevant Hapuniwi choosing a wetland solution over a rock filter. I'm sure they all have their own reasons for their preferences, but I've certainly come across it before, and my understanding is that they see a range of cultural benefits with the wetland option, as well as effectively they're compromising. They're compromising from their preferred solution, which would be a fully land-based discharge. And I guess that's what I've seen through this process of the working party, is that certainly positions were well established at the outset, and a range of factors. But as we've gone through and everyone's had that mindset of trying to meet those project objectives of affordability, safe and reliable, and reflecting the partnership process, there has been this element of compromise. So that's my understanding and perception of the process.
Thank you. Thank you. So, are you happy for us to go to some others, Mayor Clark, and then come back?
Yeah, no, I just want to finish the line. So again, the objectives that are quoted in the report talk about safe and reliable wastewater discharge and being achievable, affordable and deliverable, and meaningful and constructive consultation with stakeholders and the community. So there are two issues in there for me. I still grapple with how I explain to ratepayers that iwi has a position that actually is detrimental to what we discharge out the pipe. So we've heard Aaron say, and we've heard some of the members of the advisory panel say, that there will be a negative impact on the quality of the water discharged to the ocean by going through wetlands, where there is not a negative impact environmentally by going through the rock formation. And the second issue is, it talks about, reflects the constructive consultation with stakeholders and the community. And I'd like some understanding, what does the community actually mean? Is that the Bluff community we're talking about, or is it the Invercargill city community who will be paying for this?
So I'm happy to answer that
Sure.
final piece. There's not been consultation with the Bluff community, with the exception of obviously working with the Bluff Community Board, that is any different to what has gone out through the communications to the whole Invercargill community, which was essentially information that was put out through a media statement asking for, essentially outlining the process and asking if people had any questions or feedback on the process to provide it through to the team. That went out to all members of the community, irrespective of whether they were in Bluff or not. We only had reach out from one party, who were a Bluff party, and therefore we met with them and had some discussions with them. But we haven't, with the exception of speaking to the Bluff Community Board, we haven't distinguished the Bluff community from the broader community.
And the very last question.
You promise?
Happy to know, Chair. Our promise. And this is a technical one for somebody that deals with wetlands. I understand that we have a saltwater issue involved with the wetlands proposal with 1F. And I understand that setting up a wetlands that involves saltwater is not an easy process.
Jim, are you happy to take that one?
Yes, thank you. The selection of plants is the key matter here in terms of the nature of the wetland. Yes, when we say saltwater problem, we have an elevated water level from the fishing industry trade wastes, but the considerations to date show that the appropriate plants and the appropriate design and management of the wetlands that should be able to be accommodated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've got Pania, then Trish, Tom, Leslie and Ria. So, Pania.
Firstly, I want to note that Te Rūnaka o Awaroa supports the Bluff Community Board position supporting option 1F.
Can you speak into your mic, please, Pania? Sorry, it's just...
Okay. Do you want me to start again? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Firstly, I want to note that Te Rūnaka o Awaroa supports the Bluff Community Board's position supporting option 1F. Yes, we are trying to compromise, knowing our preferred option is discharge to land, not to ocean, river or lake. So after, we've had a lot of discussion around this, and so we recognise that the costs associated with this approach significantly exceeds the current budget allocation. So with that support though, we support it in principle. We also, these are sort of subject to conditions as well, because one thing is the feasibility assessment, to make sure that the adjacent wetland, the small section, is viable for the wastewater management. Another one is around pipe extension. We advocate for extending the 50-metre discharge pipe to a greater distance to minimise potential impacts on the coastal environment. Baseline data collection, as discussed, we want to know the current state of our mahinga kai, our kai moana along the front and back of Ocean Beach. Should we conduct to inform monitoring efforts? And compliance assurance, our solution must align to the regional coastal plan for Southland. The other thing we're really sort of still concerned with is around the residential contaminants that persist in treated wastewater. While some will be mitigated through the wetland, others will not be effectively addressed. So one of the things Dean spoke about at the workshop is that we have these really nasty diseases, and with the COVID strains that exist, there's still the unknown impact it will have on our coastal marine areas and our mahinga kai and our ecosystems. So I think those are things that we need to start thinking about, if we're looking at future generations. The extension of the pipe, the logic around that is that the further out it goes, for currents, the further it can wash out into the depth of the ocean. And I mean, when you think about ships that come in to dispose of their wastewater, they have to go out 12 miles from the furthest point to actually clean out, to rinse out. So we have a pipe only 50 metres, which is concerning, and the concern's not just the Rūnaka concerns, it's if we look at our agricultural development at Ocean Beach, that whole community there are concerned because it's on their doorstep. And we want to actually develop that area further. So that's our position as a Rūnaka.
Thanks, Pania. Trish.
Just two questions. First of all, Erin, you said that there would be significant cost if we had to litigate in the consent process. Can you have any idea of what that significant cost would be?
I might defer to Meredith Connell to advise the sort of costs associated with if we wind up in an environment court process for a wastewater discharge. Are you able to advise what you're sort of seeing in that space?
Hi, and hello everyone. It's difficult to say off the bat without knowing how much resource and how many experts are involved on either side, but it could easily stretch from a few $100,000 to $500,000, I would say. Could be eaten up in an environment court appeal.
Thank you. Then I have another question. Jim, you talked about a compromise that the iwi are making because there will be that is not the best way to put water through the wetlands, and there's going to be some contaminants. So there's also a compromise in terms of costs. If we go down this track, it's going to be quite a difference in cost for the City Council and for our ratepayers. So that's a compromise also that we have to make. So I think the two compromises need to be considered carefully.
Is that a question to one of the
No,
panel
it
or just a
wasn't really,
statement?
but it's just, what I meant was...
Oh, I'm just wondering if you wanted the response.
I beg your pardon. Jim, would you,
Yeah, Jim,
you
yeah.
can speak to that.
Yeah,
In
Jim,
terms
go.
of- In terms of using the word compromise, I also talked about the roadmap over time, and that approach has come through in the discussions that I've been part of with the working group. Iwi, almost without exception, around New Zealand have a preference for everything to land.
Yeah.
But as things have been worked through, as intergenerational considerations and going forward over time and being associated with your current consent in 1998, 99, again, that journey and taking a Maori generation into consideration were matters that we saw then and we've seen in a number of consents around New Zealand. And this can come also into the duration of the consent that is sought and granted or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
So a question I have, and this is a bit more boring than what we've been talking about so far, but if I look at the scoring that we have, and if I strip out the financial and cultural so that we only look at the technical scores, which are environment sensitivity, social and public health, and biophysical. What I notice is that if I strip those scores out and look at them, you find that 1F and 1G both outscore the land-based option. So in other words, the land-based option has scored relatively poorly compared to the water options, and I just wondered what the reason for that was.
Yeah. Andrew, did you want to speak to that option around why those particular land-based options scored poorly? And it might also be worth noting the other land-based options that were removed due to affordability.
Well, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about the first one, B1, because I realise that that's a mixed option.
Yeah.
But C1, 3C1 is a pure land-based option, and yet scores relatively poorly on the, let's say, the technical attributes, health and technical attributes, scores worse than the water-based. So I just wonder what the reason for that was.
Andrew, are you happy just to speak to that from the working group perspective?
Yeah, and if Jim has recollection of the engineering feasibility, he may wish to chip in. Yeah, there was, maybe starting at the bottom of that slide first, because I know the engineers had significant reservations about the technical feasibility ultimately for the full land disposal option, and hence that was scored, the one there. There was, there was concerns about the reticulation and I think more the land conditions being constantly available 365 days a year, and so there was just some significant reservations there. So that's for the bottom row.
So I was sorry, like just to break, I beg your pardon, but I was stripping that one out. What I was saying is, if you take those out and you look at ones that are purely, let's say, so the three that are environment sensitivity, social and public health, and biophysical. And those three, which you could say are the technical ones, I know the engineering ones are the technical ones, they score worse in the land-based one than they do in the water-based one. Which surprised me a little bit, and I just wondered why that was.
Sorry, I'm happy. Jim, My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that when we were talking about the discharge within 2 kilometres of the treatment plant, that came down to us having a pretty poor selection of land that we could discharge to. If we went further away, we felt that we would get a better effect. However, the costs of that were unaffordable. If we were restricted to that land within the immediate vicinity of the treatment plant, we had significant concerns about the land's ability to essentially support a discharge of that type. Is that essentially about the bones of it, Jim?
Yep. Yeah, well summarised. Within 2 kilometres, the two that came through the shortlist, the rocky and relatively steepish topography, causing quite a concern to the practicalities of it, compared to those 2 options that were removed of going 5 kilometres or more into more porous, potentially sandy country, which would have scored much higher on the technicality point of view, but of course, we just highlighted the affordability took it well outside the range.
Again, I'm only talking about the technical one. So biophysical, what do you take from that? So biophysical has scored poorer in the land-based options than it does in the water-based options. So that's got nothing to do with engineering or. So what should I take from that?
And I would need to go back to the criteria that the specialists that did that actually looked at. I could look at that in the next moment if you wish.
Yeah, look, I'm not trying to draw any particular conclusions. I was just intrigued by the fact that if you strip out cultural, financial, then you find that the 2 water-based ones score much higher than the 2 land-based ones that are there.
Andrew, did you want to talk to that?
You can talk about it at some future workshop, but it's.
My recollection, sir, was that there was some wetland remnants and some of the larger land parcels the ones closer within the range 3C1 that was under consideration. There was concerns about potential effects on that. I'll call that as part of the discussion, but I don't know if that was the sole reason for the scoring. And that come back to you, Jim, once you found it.
Yes, if I could just come back to the biophysical and looking at the table in the alternatives assessment report. Biophysical brought in the natural environment criteria and impact on climate change, greenhouse gases, etc. So it's that wider climate change, wider greenhouse gas emissions situation. And in that respect, climate change, wetter periods means more wastewater periods, particularly in the winter period, means larger land application areas and storage, wet weather storage ponds. So that comes into it. And from a carbon footprint point of view, more pumping, etc., means greater greenhouse gas emission following the kind of guidelines we use in New Zealand to compare options. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Isley.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, I just want to start by making the statement that tossing around the term right of veto is a careless use of words to be used in this debate. No one who has spoken or put forward an opinion in this matter, and that includes the Bluff Community Board and the Runanga, who have both expressed the option preference for 1F, are talking about a right to veto. They are talking about, in essence, what we are here and what it says in the title of tab 9. Best practicable option for the Bluff wastewater consent. The Bluff wastewater consent, not the consent in any other part of the country, but specifically the unique features of Bluff that we've heard our experts talk about, that Erin's talked about, that others have talked about, and the best practicable option. To me, that has meant a lot of compromise has taken place here. many of us would have started with the preference for a land-based solution. It has become abundantly clear that is not the best practicable option for Bluff, and people who have expressed views today have come to that conclusion quite rightly. It's got nothing to do with pejorative terms like veto. It's looking for what is the compromise that can be made here for the Bluff situation. And that's why I wanted particularly to ask Jim. Jim, you referred to some iwi having made the decision that the 1G solution of the rock filter, etc., worked for them. Others who had said no, the definite preference was the 1F solution of the wetland. In our unique Bluff situation, the preference has been expressed by Te Aramarama, by the Runaga and by the Bluff Community Board for 1F, the wetland solution. Other parts of the country and other iwi have made different decisions, but that has been, I take it, very much based on the unique geographical content of their own regions. It hasn't just come out of the blue, we suddenly like wetlands. If an iwi has decided we'll go for the rock rather than the wetland, that's because there's something about their particularly unique geographical situation that has helped make that more of the preference.
I don't know if Jim can
What
answer
I'm
that,
saying
Kenny.
is, can you compare? There was a little bit of an implication that you could somehow compare iwi against iwi as to whether or not they preferred wetlands or a rock filter. It seems to me that iwi who express their preference one way or the other, in this case are doing it as the best practicable option for their unique region. Would that be a fair comment?
The first comment is that I cannot, having worked and had the privilege of working with iwi from Bluff to Northland over many years, I cannot compare reasons why. It comes down to personal circumstances and particularly their cultural, spiritual dimension, coupled with, as you rightly said, what is available geographically, land-wise, etc. That said, however, there would be more wetland type arrangements than rock passages at various times. We have some inland discharges that go through Gabion baskets, for example, and rather than the rock channel, Gabion baskets. But again, it's that same principle from that particular iwi's point of view, what is it achieving? Two of the larger ones with rock passages or rock chambers are in fact Hastings and Dunedin Tahuna, the main Dunedin Tahuna plant. They would be two of the larger rock passage, rock chamber, touching Papatenuku, Earth Mother, for example. Many others have seen the wetland as a more naturalistic as this has been approached and have taken a wider environment into consideration in their situation. A number of the wetlands have a go back many years, like Honoré, Tauranga, where that whole appreciation of nature, of contacting with Earth Mother has come into it. So it's been very much iwi by iwi in local circumstances, notwithstanding the overall parameters, the overall considerations of iwi with respect to the discharge, often, no matter how well treated, of human sewage. I hope that's, I've kind of rambled a little bit, I hope that has helped this journey. And in many of these wetlands, of course, what is important is where are the monitoring and the measurement points and how regularly is it measured and what are the maintenance requirements of such arrangements.
Okay, so thank you, because that's helped confirm that it's very much a geographical and a decision of the place, the particular place, that we're talking about here, and that the choice of wetland, which, as you say, and I was pretty sure from my own knowledge, had the higher numbers over rock channels over many years, is indeed that's where the balance is laid over quite a long time, that wetlands have been the preference. Jim, is it fair to say that although there is listed in the disadvantages a slightly increased public health and ecological risk with the wetland option, that very much comes down to the way in which you then maintain and monitor your plant, that the two have as much legitimacy in the places they are chosen, and the risk can be very much mitigated.
Yes, correct. And the key mechanism there is the resource consent conditions that are proposed and with or without changes granted to a particular situation.
Thank you, that was my understanding also. So the preference for a wetland solution, if we're talking about a compromise, is as completely legitimate for our region as any other choice, such as the rock formation, and there are very legitimate reasons why you would say for a particular place that the wetland was the preference. You don't necessarily have to answer that if you'd prefer not to.
Well, I think it's clear that the iwi the preference is with iwi around the wetland versus the rock formation in this case.
Yeah, and there is no right of veto.
It's not Jim saying it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So I just wanted to absolutely clarify that, because I think it is dangerous to throw around or toss around the term right of veto as though somehow our Bluff Community Board and our
We've cleared that point up.
and Te Aramarama
we've
are
cleared
trying
that
to
point
use a veto. It's just not a legitimate part of this conversation at all.
We've
We are
dealt
talking about
with that.
best practicable option.
Yeah. I've got Rhea and then Tom again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Smith very much took my points that I wanted to raise. I just wanted to add to that on the 19th of September we had the workshop with experts in the room and also on Zoom meeting. And those experts went through the presentation list I found quite thoroughly, especially with the technical data that they were what was the difference between
Can you speak into your mic? I think the people online are struggling to hear.
water discharge through the wetlands model versus the rock model was made quite clear. Also with excess water that was contaminated, the UV process was made quite clear as well. I felt quite confident that due to the expert advice that we were receiving, because we don't actually have environmental rules behind us in this room, that I was quite comfortable that they were telling us to the best of their knowledge how we could navigate our way through with collaboration with all parties together to get this through. With the best model that they gave to us was 1F. So, you know, listening to everything that's been said today and the bits and pieces that are challenging, especially when there are comments made that are not fitting for Māori culture involvement or considerations. I'm leaning on the expert advice, and I think it would be unwise of us to ignore that.
Can I just make the point though, Councillor Bond, that the separation of the two is in that context of that cultural significance. That's what puts 1G ahead of 1F. So it's not a expert advice, it's a cultural piece of advice, right?
Well, it's expert advice backed up along with the cultural advice that goes seamlessly through this process. One of the points that one of our advisors gave us was that he couldn't ascertain whether or not from the north end to south end that the same option would be viable, because there's a climate change, there's geothermal changes, there's environmental coasting changes, there's shapes of different and geological shapes. So because iwi's agreed with some things from north into Invercargill, iwi's had, although they have very different tikanga considerations with their land and their environment, it's not one size fits all. We shouldn't think that.
So, Tom and then Mayor Clark.
Look, I think it's the word compromise has been used several times, and I, 100% agree with that. I do think though that if the two options 1F and 1G cost the same or approximately the same, then a simple choice without any explanation would be fine. But given one is double the cost of the other, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for, what is the explanation that provides a reason why, rock is unacceptable and the other one is acceptable, given that, both systems have been used around the country and, different iwi have supported each. So, I cannot think of anything else would come to this chamber, anything else, where if a proponent was asking for something double the cost, they were able to do so without providing any explanation at all. Cannot think of anything where that would be the case.
No, that's right.
So I think it's entirely right, as I think you said earlier on, Chair, that we should actually be asking for why is it particularly significant here? And I take, what Ria said is there's a whole lot of reasons it might be true, and that might be so, Ria, but we'll still get a right to ask why. Which of all those reasons is the reason that locally we don't, which are all those reasons locally we don't support the Rock Channel? So I think it's reasonably asked that question.
Yeah, so I've got Mayor Clark, then Alex.
Two questions really. One for Erin. So we've now got today conditional support from iwi and from Ray from his position for 1F, but it is conditional to new ultraviolet or additional ultraviolet and an extended pipe. So is it reasonable to assume that the figure that you've got on your report of 15 million does not take into account those two issues?
So that's correct, Chair. When it comes to the UV, that didn't concern me significantly because we already had money in the program to upgrade the UV, and therefore that would just be a matter of pulling that money forward. So I wasn't particularly concerned around the impact of the UV. The extension of the outfall is a concern, and that was one that I wasn't aware of that condition until right before the meeting. Actually, I was aware that support had come through right before the meeting, but I actually wasn't aware of that condition until it was spoken to by Pania. That is something that we will need to work through and we can provide advice back to Council when it comes through, just to advise if we do see if there'll be any impact on the program around that.
And through you, Chair, the other question is for the lawyer that's online.
Brandon. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. You gave us some advice that between 200,000 and 500,000 for a legal cost if there were a challenge to whatever was approved under the consent. But surely, given that Council is not approving the consent will be approved by Environment Southland. The legal costs do not lie with us. They would lie with whoever was challenging the approver. Is that right?
Well, if the regional council made a decision, say whether it's to grant or decline or whatever it might be, and one or the other party, whether it was whichever party is dissatisfied with the outcome, which might be the council perhaps, appealed, or it might be another party appealing because they're unhappy with the outcome. It's true that the regional council would probably appear on appeal and have some comment in support of its decision, but I think the biggest burden would fall on Invercargill City Council to advance its position with its evidence and its case, and those are the costs that I was really thinking about. The cost of lawyers, cost of expert witnesses, etc.
Do you want to comment?
Sorry,
can I just grab Darren? Sorry,
a quick
Brandon.
question on that. It's also possible that somebody can object, surely, just at the point of our application, before a decision is made by the regional council.
Exactly.
And that's
Yes, that's quite right, and I suppose if there are objections at the council level, that will increase the cost of the council process as well.
So just
And that's probably worth factoring into your thinking too.
So just another question in relation to that. So who can appeal a decision on a consent? Can one of the parties, which in this case, let's say the parties are iwi and the council, but can anybody in the community appeal a decision?
Anyone who made a submission on the application has a right of appeal. So anyone who was notified could make a submission. So that's where it starts. Who's notified of the application? And then anyone who makes a submission then has a right of appeal in subsequent processes.
Thank you.
Okay.
And through you, Chair, that just reinforces my view that we should be going down the Fast Track Act.
But we're not, so we can't get through that process.
No, you heard Aaron say that the fact that we're not on Schedule 1 does not mean that we cannot apply to that process for our consent.
Yeah.
And that's the advice I've been given as well. But
yeah, I think we'd need probably, I'm not familiar with what the government's decided around when the next hearing for fast track is.
I think what we would need to do if council decided that it still wanted to pursue the fast track process, we would need to seek some clarification around when we could lodge an application for that process. Yeah. The advice I'm getting at the moment is that it's unlikely to work for us with our timing. That being said, we obviously have the feasibility work to do before we decide to finalise the lodgement, and we can gain that advice ahead of lodging the application.
Okay, thank you. So Alex and then Steve, and then we'll move to the motions.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I guess a bit of a statement and then a question. Look, I'm happy to support 1F today. I think the objectives were clear in this exercise. The report is clear. It's actually worth reading. The rationale across a range of factors have been explained. The stakeholders in the mix, engineers, planners, experts, iwi, Te Ao Marama, the Bluff Community Board, thanks for being here today, Ray, are all in agreement that 1F is the best option, and it's been detailed. There's been a huge amount of compromise in the mix here, which is hugely valuable. But I just really believe, and it was maybe when Dean Whanga was sitting here a couple of weeks ago, what a privilege it is for me to have the voice of mana whenua and iwi in this discussion. What a privilege and a blessing a partnership model is. And I was really moved by the belief that a wetland is like the kidney of this ecosystem. It's not a perspective that I had, which is why it's valuable to me and why it should be valuable to us around this table. We're going to be careful what filters we are looking through when we make a decision like this. Just to Aaron, I guess, there are some conditions and considerations attached to the stakeholder support of 1F. I guess, where does this place us in our ability to make a decision on things today?
Well, remembering we're making a recommendation to council, not a decision.
Yeah, so it's a recommendation to council. What we'll work through is we can work through with Awarua the question that they've raised around the outfall, but that has equal application to the status quo option, the rock outfall option, or the wetland option. So I think I'm happy that we can proceed with a recommendation to council today, and we can make sure that any advice that would impact council's final decision is brought back to council at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Alex, did you want to speak? Yep, you go.
With your permission.
Sorry, it's just clarifying a couple of things. things.
With your permission, I actually don't have a hell of a lot to say because my good friend Steve here has really summed it up quite succinctly. But what I'm hearing around the table that I think is extremely concerning from a making mokopuna decisions perspective is that we've heard from our Bluff Community Board, we've heard the views of the community through them, we have heard from our people in Arunanga, and what I'm hearing around the table is that Bluff's not worth the money. Like in the drop of our actual revenue take and all of our ratepayers, like literally for Bluff, that's not a lot of money for drastic environmental, cultural, spiritual, and fit for the future improvement. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that. Thanks.
So I can't leave that comment without sort of, so in terms of drastic environmental, I mean the criteria that we're presented with doesn't show that.
Based on what's appropriate.
There's not a drastic difference between the different perspectives.
Well,
So
during the workshop, we were actually provided a lot of expert information and technical information about how...
Which is represented in the grid here. The experts have been involved in that, right? So I just think we've got to be cautious around, saying that, the drastic environmental impacts when it clearly doesn't show out here in the grid. There's not a significant gap between the outcomes environmentally.
If we were only talking about 1F and 1G, yes, but those are not the only options that we've been considering
No, that's right.
today.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like we've also been throwing around the status quo, which in comparison, I'm not confining it only to 1F and 1G there. Sorry, Grant. We've got a lot of options on the table here.
Yeah, right. Okay, so look, we're going to move to the recommendations, and what I'm going to do is take and seek a move and seconder for the first 5. So receive the report, receive the attached presentation options assessment, note the technical working groups, shortlist options and the preferences, note the request from Council for technical working group considerations around option 1A, and note the advice on significance and staff recommendations. So can I have a mover and a seconder to accept that? Thanks, Leslie. Seconded, Trish. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Please note my abstention.
Yes, in relation to a conflict of interest. Okay, so 7.
So, Mr Chair, I'd like to move that we recommend to Council that it select option 1F as the best practicable option. I'm also prepared to move number 8 with the same choice of option A, that is option 1F is the best practicable option.
Okay, so just to be clear, so 7 is moving that 1F is the best practical option, 8 is...
They're both moving option 1F as the best practical
Yeah, request staff
option.
to proceed to concept design. And then 9, the council considers if the matter is significant. So, do we need to take 9 with those 3, or can we do that? Yeah, well, okay, so we've got a mover.
Happy to move 9 as well if you would like 9.
Yeah, because I don't see any separation between 9 and the other 2. So are you happy with that as mover? There's no separation between 7, 8 and 9 in terms of what you're moving?
Happy to move 7, 8 and 9.
Okay. And Ria's seconding it. So,
Chair, I'd like to speak to that. I think there will be people around this table who will be happy with 1F, but still feel as though we should have a public consultation process. So it'd be my preference that we run 7 and 8 together, not 7, 8 and 9.
Council considers.
yeah, sorry, yeah, the consultation process, okay. So I'll take some comment on that, and also I'd be keen to seek the committee's guidance and a recommendation which potentially sees an additional motion around the council having a more thorough some more thorough feedback from Te Marama regarding their preferences, just so that we have a greater understanding of that. I think that's pretty important. So I'm prepared to put that motion in as well. But I'll be keen to have some discussion around that and also the consultation. Tom?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
I would second that, but I would also, I really think that we should get a paper, cultural paper describing why
Point of
1F
order
is preference to 1G.
on
Just hold it.
And you know, that would prevent me voting against 1F. I would stand back and not vote rather than vote against it, because I think when it comes to council, I think it's very important that council at least understand the cultural significance of 1F versus 1G. And I don't understand people who object to that, to be honest. In any other walk of life, anything that was brought to this council, we would not simply accept on the basis of somebody saying, well, that's my preference. I know it's twice as expensive, but that's my preference.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, my point of order is on...
Yeah, can you just hold it there for a minute? I want to talk to Michael, so you can just hold it till I talk to Michael, please.
There's already a motion on the table. No, you can't. It's 27.2, breach of standing order, point B. If the motion for breach of standing order is already
And then yeah, okay. So what I want to do, so accepting what you're saying about we've got a mover and a seconder for the motion. We can, however, and I want to seek out the committee's support for Tom's additional amendment of that we seek a paper on the cultural background to the support of the options.
That would require the mover and seconder to accept the amendment.
No, it doesn't. So that anyone can move an amendment to a motion which has already been put on the table for discussion at any time. So Councillor Campbell and Councillor Dermody as chair can do that. That amendment would then be voted on, and if the amendment is passed, it then becomes part of the substantive motion that has been moved by Councillor Soper. So that would be the process under standing orders to have that amendment made. If the amendment is lost, then the motion as it was originally put without the additional report would stand and then be voted on.
Yeah. So Tom, just could I ask you to word the proposed amendment you'd like to make?
Is it up there? It's not up there at all, is it? So does it become 9?
Yeah.
No, there's already a 9. 9 is moved. 7, 8 and 9 are all moved and seconded.
Yeah, so we'd have
They're
10.
all on the
There
table.
isn't even a 9 up there yet.
Apologies, Councillor. It would be 9 on the screen. Unfortunately, number 6, for whatever reason, known only to who knows who, didn't make it to the agenda page. So it is actually 9 that we're talking about, but it's on the screen, not on your board book. So I do apologise for that
sorry,
error.
in that case, what is 6?
So
There isn't a 6. There was a 5, 7, 8 and 9.
So 6 on the screen is what you have moved.
So I've moved. So the move is now 6, 7 and 8.
Yes, thank you.
Because
Apologies
of a
for
number
that.
problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, Tom, do you want to wordsmith your?
So whatever
line?
number it is, it would be that council requests that a paper, this committee requests that a paper is brought to council describing the reason for the cultural preference for 1F compared to 1G. It would just be cultural preference. It's not cultural.
So the committee. So it's the committee.
Amendments and motions that are not seconded are not voted.
Preference, not reason.
Behind the is brought to council describing the cultural preference, yeah.
Describing the cultural preference for 1G. Or is it between 1F and 1G?
But the council requests that a paper is brought to council describing the cultural preference for between 1F and 1G.
Yeah, okay, so I'm happy to second that, move that motion.
Sorry,
So-
Chair, can I just seek clarity? What I heard was that there were some members of the committee that would only vote for, I think, option 7, if it had that proviso that's provided on 9. So I just want to seek clarity that is achieved by option 9 being a separate recommendation.
That's not actually what I said.
Oh, okay, sorry, I just wanted to make sure
what I
then
said
that
was
we're
that I would
happy.
not vote against
Okay,
1F,
cool.
which is not the same as saying I would vote.
No worries at all. I just wanted to make sure we didn't get ourselves into trouble.
I'm not sure I quite understand that conversation. So can we just have some
Sorry, councillor,
clarity?
that conversation isn't actually relevant. How each councillor chooses to vote is a matter for them. We shouldn't be safeguarding motions on the basis of how councillors may or may not choose to vote. That's not how democracy works.
No, I totally agree, but because the statement was made, I just need to clarify what the statement was. I heard that there might be an intention not to vote at all, unless this 9 was accepted.
What I took it was that councillor was commenting on their preference to have, that amendment included helps them understand and therefore support a particular way of deciding. So it gives greater clarity and information to what they're thinking around their particular option.
May I
So
make it?
I'm not keen to turn this into kangaroo court. So we've got the motion 9. So
The amendment, Mr. Chair, is on the table
Yes.
to amend the motion. That amendment can now be debated to whether it becomes a substantive motion.
Right. Okay.
Alright.
Just the inclusion of 9.
So
Which
we
is
don't-
just the inclusion of 9. It's nothing. It's not the
So do
substantive
we need to
motion.
have a debate, or can we just have a vote?
It's up to you as chair.
So where would 9, if passed, then be included?
It would then be added as 9 to that suite of motions that you have moved,
Which is
and
a
become the
recommendation.
substantive motion in its entirety.
And a recommendation to council. So when we're receiving this recommendation from the committee through to council, we would receive that report as part of those recommendations. Is that all? Yep. Okay, I think we go straight to a vote on this. So
I think it's...
just on 9, I'm only taking
Yes, and
on the
that's why I
amendment.
think it's necessary to ask if people want to speak to 9, because I do not see that 9 is adding anything to what is on the table with 6, 7 and 8.
Yeah, well, look,
I just fail to see what 9 would add
Well,
to the picture that we have not discussed endlessly over most of the debates that we have had on the Bluff wastewater
Yeah, so-
consent best practicable option.
So to your point, I think we have had quite a good discussion. Therefore, I'm happy for just to go straight to a vote. So it's been moved in by Tom and seconded by myself. So I'll ask for a show of hands around 9. The committee requests for a paper to council to describe the cultural preferences between 1F and 1G. Can I have hands, please? Well,
Chair, point of order. I have my hand up because I want to call for a division of vote.
yeah, sorry, that's what I'm intending to do. Sorry. Yeah. So can I have we'll go division. So can I have a show of hands, please, for the support of 9? All those in favour, please raise your hand. 7. So 7. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's that's carried. So that's now included in the recommendations. 7, 8 and 9. So now I probably have to ask Leslie and Rhea if they're happy to support that. becomes part of that motion. Okay, so that's on the table now. We're learning all the time.
Sorry, Anna, what happened there?
So now we are recommending through to council that that the committee requests a paper to be brought to council, outlining. Can you just lift that up so I can read it line for line? Describing the cultural preferences between 1F and 1G, and that amendment to the motion's been passed. So now.
No, it hasn't. It's just become the substantive
motion.
motion.
It's become standard motion. So now that becomes.
Now we're voting on all four, Tom.
Yeah. Yes. So we're now voting on
6, 7, 8 and 9.
In that order.
It's now up for discussion.
Yeah.
So 6, 7, 8 and 9 are in the order they are in.
Yes, Trish.
I just want clarification. If we vote on the whole 4, including 1F, and it is in the, that's what we choose to do, and we have 9 as we've voted for that amendment, and at the council meeting we get information that is further to what we needed perhaps for today, we'll be voting again on 1F or whatever, so
yeah.
we still have the option
yeah.
to not choose 1F at the council meeting.
Correct.
Yeah. Is that correct?
This is only a recommendation from this committee
to council.
But you have the option to not vote at all. I mean,
Yes.
I will not vote for 1F at the moment. I might well support it when it gets to council, but I would like to see the paper described in paragraph 9. But I'm not going to vote against 1F, but I'm not going to vote in favour of it because I want to see 9.
Okay. Right, let's go with the vote. Oh, Nobby, sorry.
I just think you'll need some clarification in voting on number 8. Because number 8 doesn't actually give us a
I was
position.
going to say, as a staff member, I would like some clarification around that one.
It's by having the word "if the matter is significant." If you want a position on that, you'd have that council considers the matter as significant or insignificant.
So this is a recommendation to council. So we are.
What you're recommending to council is there should be some public consultation or not, and that doesn't clarify either.
No,
So
we're not
Grant,
recommending
the question is, does
Yeah.
it trigger our significance policy? And we're seeking clarification on that. I think that's the intent of 8, but it doesn't say it.
Yeah. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so,
Can I just go
so
to
the intent of 8 is that staff don't consider it to be, to trigger significance. However, there was feedback provided that there was some strong views that it may trigger significance, so we put it in there as a very clear recommendation to seek some guidance around that.
So therefore that is it a motion?
Recommendation.
Recommendation, sorry, yeah, thank you, at 8, then directs staff to give that consideration and make a recommendation to the council meeting.
So with Michael's advice, my preference would be that an amendment be put on the table to that recommendation to provide clarity to staff around whether council sees that the matter is significant or not significant, depending on whether or not you wish to proceed to consultation.
And so that would be a matter for councillors Soper and Bond as the mover and seconder, whether they are comfortable to do so.
At the moment, I'm certainly not comfortable as the mover because as far as I'm concerned, what the 8 is currently asking, or this committee is asking council to consider if the matter meets a significant policy or not. I can't see why we would change that approach. We are asking council to consider that. If council considers there is significance and it triggers our public consultation policy, then we would ask staff to organise a public consultation on whatever the final decision is. At the moment, this committee, with the current wording, is asking council to consider the matter. I can't see we can make it any clearer than that.
Yes, Rhea, what's your point as the seconder? Okay.
It buys a couple of weeks' time for people to think about significance.
Yeah. Happy with that. Okay, that clarify things. Right, so we'll take a vote on 6, 7, 8 and 9. So we will go for division. So can I have a show of hands for support of those recommendations as they are in front of us? All those in favour, raise your hand.
Chair, just a point of order.
Yeah.
I mean, some of us are in invidious positions now, where I do support 9, and I do support 8, but I don't support 6 and 7. So by doing the suite all in one go, I'm caught out that I can't.
Yeah, true.
I'm
Can I ask,
So,
move
it, yeah.
if they're happy to take each motion, each
Yeah.
recommendation as an individual motion?
No, Mr Chair, I am not happy as the mover to take them separately. There was ample time through this discussion for anybody to have indicated that they wanted these to be taken separately. They were quite clearly moved as a whole. There was then the debate about adding 9 to the whole. There was no question raised at the time of moving number 9 of it being some sort of separate motion that preceded the others. And at this moment I think it would be procedurally a nonsense for this council to decide that we will now somehow separate these because some councillors have decided they are uncomfortable. It was quite clear that 6, 7 and 8 and the resulting 9, which was carefully explained, was an amendment to the 3 motions that had already been moved. It was very clear that they were moved as a block. It was very clear from the explanation that if 9 was passed, it became part of that block. As the mover, I am not of a mind that we should now take the procedurally nonsense route of separating them.
Thank you. So yeah, so given we are where we are, so we've got the option of receiving them as a block. If there's people against receiving them as a block or doesn't support particular aspects of it, then they'll obviously vote against the motion as a block, and then we'll have to come back and take it a different way. Right. Which is a pain. But anyway, we are where we are. Okay. Pardon? With respect to the motions already put. No. Okay, so we'll go to the vote. So all those in favour of supporting the recommendation 6, 7, 8 and 9 as they are in a block, please raise your hands. Rhea, did you? Yeah, Rhea had a hand up. How many? Seven and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 7 and support. Okay, and those against? What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can you count? 1, 2, 3. Keep your hands up, please. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. Is it 7? So 7. 7, 6. So that it's defeated as a block.
I'm sorry, but I would have to question that count and ask.
Okay,
that
yeah, so
again.
let's go through it again just to be absolutely clear. So those supporting the recommendations in a block, please raise your hands and hold them up till we've counted. So you've got 4, 5, 6. You've got 6. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's defeated as a block. So now we need to go and take them as an individual.
So now you need to have someone else move.
Oh,
Number 9 has now been...
So we'll take them as individuals.
Yep.
So number 9 doesn't exist, so we have to put that back in as a motion. Yeah, so...
Sorry, Chair, sure. I don't know what the process would be, but I mean, what I think, having lost that motion, we should take them one at a time.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I want to do. But what we need to do now, because 9 was part of the original block, if there's support for 9, we have to have a mover and a seconder to put that back on, and then we'll take that individually.
Yep.
Okay, so can I have a mover and a second to have 9 included in the recommendations? Oh, sorry.
Individual, so Councillor, it would help if we could have a mover and a seconder for recommendation 6, and it doesn't have to be option 1F.
Move recommendation 6 with 1F.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we've got Darren moving and we've got Alex seconding. So we'll take the vote on that.
You can have a discussion or you can take a vote.
Don't think we need a discussion. So we'll have a vote on that. So all those in favour of option 1F as the best practical option, please raise your hand.
Can you just clarify again what we're voting for?
So you're just voting on the recommendation 6 of the option of 1F as the best practical option.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if you vote for this, you're saying 1F is the best practical option, just to be really clear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. And against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's... No, I haven't voted. I've abstained. And then...
Sorry, were there some deliberate abstentions there?
Pardon?
Were there some deliberate abstentions
Yeah,
there?
there was.
And noting abstentions from Councillor Dermody and Councillor Campbell.
Okay, thank
And
you for
then,
clarifying.
And your...
yeah, Evelyn.
Conflict, yes.
So then 7. So can I have
I'll
some...
move 7 with option 1F as the best practicable option.
Okay, second Rhea. So we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Only 6 that time. Okay, those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 5. That's supported, 6, 5. With 2 abstentions, yeah. And then 8, council considers if the matter is significant and if so request staff to initiate public consultation. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please?
Moved.
Seconded, Rhea. Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Oh. We can just take an eye on that. Against? Carried.
Abstain on that, thanks.
Okay, and then, so there's 9 on the table?
No, someone needs to move 9. We've kept it there because I'm assuming
I'll move it.
Councillor Campbell or
I'll
Councillor
second it.
Boyle.
Okay, so Alex was second. Who was Barry? Oh, yeah. Well, Trish moved. Alex second. Okay, all those in favour of...
May I speak to the motion as the seconder?
Yes, you can.
I put this, I seconded this actually so I could have a corridor about it. I really don't think that this is the right motion to be on the table. I think this is going to cause a really divisive cultural argument, especially if it's going to blow up and create a Māori wards type scenario where you've got people who don't have the same access to the same experts and the same information that we have been taken throughout this process. And like, I foresee this being horrific and creating a giant cultural divide. And I really don't think it should be on the table, and I really urge us all to vote it down.
So you've spoken to the motion. Thank you for that. Yeah, is there anyone that wishes to speak?
Yep, certainly. I don't agree with what Alex just said. I think Tom quite clearly said that in all the documents that we've got, and I've got a whole bundle on, at no stage do I have any clarification of why iwi were opposed to 1G. And it would be helpful for me when I have to eventually vote at full council and explain to ratepayers why we go for 1F or 1G, what the rationale was, and there's none in those documents. So I think it's appropriate for us to ask for some explanation. It doesn't necessarily need to be that iwi have to provide the explanation. It could very well be that the staff provide it, because they're the ones that have been negotiating.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to clarify one thing you said before. Did you and Tom both abstain from voting on option, on recommendation 7?
Yep.
You did?
Yep.
And 8 as well?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So no further comment on that. So we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of the committee requesting the paper be brought to council describing the cultural preferences between 1F and 1G. We will go for division on this, so can I have a show of hands if you support that motion? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The motion's passed. Yeah, we will take a brief toilet stop and drink stop, so we'll be back in here 10 minutes, so be back in here by 10 to, please. We are going to change the agenda slightly, so we will take tab 11, the land transport program paper, and then we will take tab 10, the variable update on Dunedin Hospital. So, Erin, if you could go with that. We're live. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will just take us through this one in Doug's absence today. So in September, we received advice from the New Zealand Transport Agency around our funding allocations under the National Land Transport Program. The committee may recall that as part of our planning for the long-term plan, that back in September last year we submitted to the Transport Agency our funding bids or funding requests for the next 3 years. What we always do is we essentially place those bids, we then put that funding allocation through the long-term plan process, noting that for most categories, we would normally expect to see 50% funding coming through from the New Zealand Transport Agency. And then if we don't get that full funding amount, which we tend not to, we come back and we essentially would adjust down so that we meet that funding allocation from the Transport Agency with our 50% share. Now, as you may or may not have seen in the media, the current government has made quite a change to the provisions for what it's looking to fund under the National Land Transport Program. There's been quite a switch away from the previous government's focus around Road to Zero and a focus back on very much on core maintenance and around the pothole fund that the government has put forward. In general, the allocation that Invercargill City Council has received is reasonably good compared to what we've heard from our neighbours. We're probably less concerned than what others are, but it has left us with a few areas of concern. And those areas of concern are outlined in the paper. One of them is around the significant reduction in our footpath renewal program. And so that reduction means that we would see our if we only went forward with a program where we received 50% funding, we would need to drop down to around a third of our program for the next 3 years. And then similarly in our low cost, low risk and safety programs, we would also, in those instances, we've received zero funding in those categories. So what we've put forward to Council is to consider whether or not Council would like to, rather than reduce its co-funding back to the level that the Transport Agency has put forward, whether the Council or the committee might recommend to Council to keep the existing long-term plan funding in there, but noting that that would result in us 100% funding some of those works that the Transport Agency would not be contributing funding to. So that's quite a different approach to what we've taken previously, when generally we would have not funded work, that we wouldn't have gone ahead with work that the Transport Agency hasn't funded. So happy to take feedback and questions from the committee around how they would like us to proceed moving forward.
Okay, Tom. Thanks, Erin.
So this is a little bit like the issue we had with the bus fares, isn't it? Where the government step out, say they're no longer prepared to fund it, and we're left with the question of whether we step into their shoes. I mean, I feel the same about this one as I did about the bus one, and that is that we simply cannot, every time government step back, that we step forward. There's only half the number of ratepayers as there are taxpayers, so it means that ratepayers pay twice as much as it would be if it was raised from taxation. And I just don't think we can afford to do that. Fundamentally, it frustrates the will of Parliament as well.
What was that last point?
Well, I'm saying fundamentally you're frustrating the will of Parliament as well. I mean, what government are saying is we're no longer prepared to, we don't think as a nation we're able to afford these things. And we're saying, well, you may not think so, Mr. Government, but we're going to step into your shoes, and ratepayers going to. So I don't support doing that.
Thank you. Other comments?
Sorry, can I just clarify, just so that everybody's clear? I'm not suggesting that we put additional money in to cover what the Transport Agency hasn't put in. I'm simply saying that we would continue to keep our allocation in, noting that it won't go as far because we won't have that 50% co-funding from the agency.
I misunderstood, Chair.
Okay. Yeah, so at the moment, so in simple terms, if we had $100,000 of funding from the Transport Agency and $100,000 of funding for us, they've said they're not going to give us their 100,000. That means I'm suggesting we continue to do $100,000 worth of work, noting that it won't go as far because we're not getting a subsidy, as opposed to saying we're not getting a subsidy, we're not putting in any.
So just some clarity on the paper, Erin. So on page 3 of the paper, or page 59 of board book, so just trying to understand those numbers, the reds and the blacks. So overall, the total, we're 2.3 million ahead of what we would have received normally. Is that what I'd take from that? And 24-25?
That's right. So what I've asked the team to do here is to not necessarily look at how much we asked for, but to actually look at what we received last year versus what we've received this time, so that the committee can see, you know, where we are positioned relative to what we were last year. And so yes, you're correct. That's that slight uplift from relative to last year.
And so overall, through the 3 years of this funding arrangement, we would be ahead by 2.148 million.
That sounds approximately right.
Okay. Yeah. And then what the paper's also telling us is that, so for example, walking and cycling, so the 85 million we've received for 24-25 for walking and cycling is the total quantum of what we received, or that's the difference between what we asked for and what we've received?
So in terms of walking, when it comes to the road safety promotion money, that's the area where we haven't received anything going forward.
No, sorry, walking and cycling.
So walking and cycling?
Yeah, 3. So we've received $85 million more than we asked for from the fund, is that right?
I would need to check that, Chair. I'm sorry, when it comes to the overall figures that are on that spreadsheet.
Sorry, it's 85,000. I see the zeros.
I was going to say that's
85 million.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. 85,000.
Rocky ducks.
I would need to check the figure.
We're going to be a lot of cycling and walking.
I'm just trying to find which one you're referring to.
Page 3 of the.
Okay, yeah. So we've received 85,000 more than we thought. Public transport's down by 141.
Yeah. Are you on the spreadsheet? Sorry, Chair.
No, I'm on page 59 of board book.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's correct. Sorry.
So then, I suppose, how much work would we have considered would be under local road improvements, which is down by 3.8, well, nearly 3.9 million, versus what would be included in work that's now considered to be pothole prevention?
Yeah,
so what I'm probably trying to understand is, are our roads going to be better or worse for our ratepayers given this restructure of funding that the government's proposing?
Yeah. So what we're seeing is a greater allocation of money into the physical road surface in terms of potholes, renewals and maintenance. More money has gone into that, but money has come out of those things like your footpaths. So essentially your footpaths are going to deteriorate. We won't have the money to upgrade those. Similarly, those items around low cost, low risk, so that's things like when we had the concerns around the intersection with Mill Road, we wouldn't have any money for doing any work like that. We wouldn't have any money around doing anything around school traffic sign areas. There's a program that we had in place to continue to roll out those variable messaging signs around schools. We wouldn't have money to do that. All of that's come back to a zero. And also things that we do around Active Southland that we co-fund with the other Southland councils, so bike to school programs, things like that would all have no funding allocated to them as currently seen under the Transport Agency's allocation. But more money into the bare pavement side of it.
Yeah, so it's a couple of questions there. So local road improvements includes footpaths?
No, yes, so local road improvements does, yeah.
Yeah.
Low cost, low risk doesn't.
But that's obviously a concern, particularly in consideration for that Mill Road intersection, because there was some significant accidents there.
Yeah, so the money that we would normally spend on in the low cost, low risk safety improvements categories is things like where we've got an intersection that we're having trouble with, we might put in a pedestrian refuge, we might do a widening, or again, those school traffic improvements have been key ones on our program. And so that would see, if we took our money out to match the fact that we haven't had any from the Transport Agency, that would see us doing no work in those areas for the next 3 years.
Okay. Thank you. Trish?
So my question, it's probably a dumb question, but is the money that we've got put aside that was to be matched by this, could we use that in another part?
So absolutely, council can decide to reallocate that money to somewhere else.
Yes, if we found there was more in one of these areas listed there,
yeah,
our contribution could be used in another area.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Right, so we've got... sorry, Evelyn. Did you have one?
No, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, look, I'm really concerned about the message that this is sending in terms of the safety of our citizens. I recognise that the well-being of cars is probably what we're talking about with potholes, but where is in this is our tamariki going to school? Where in this is our elderly crossing roads? Where in this is the people at the intersections that we already know are problematic? I'm sorry, it's not your fault, I do understand, but somehow we have got to find a way to actually, whilst living within our means, reprioritise how we put our funding to make up for the fact that that government is taking funding out, because I think we can't ignore the fact that we've got some real issues with intersections that have been very well nationally highlighted that we'd like to do something about, that we still are going to want to have our tamariki biking to school or walking along, say, footpaths. And how do we do that when this sort of prioritising of potholes has happened?
Erin, do you want to?
And so that's where the suggestion from staff is that we would have to reduce our program, but that we're recommending to the committee that it recommend to council that we retain the council share for these programs so that we can at least continue to do 50% of the work that we would have otherwise planned to do.
Yeah. So just on that, so we're not asking for any more funding from the council side of thing, we're just asking to hold it, and then I think and we can probably ever talk about this, Erin, and maybe a paper comes back to infrastructure around, we have to probably rethink our priorities and present back to infrastructure around, okay, well, how do we address some of those intersection safety concerns, given we've just received our funding allocation, we need to reprioritise that and come back and get approval from council that, or this committee and then council, that they're happy with that approach. That's what we're probably going to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go Darren and then Pania.
Sure, I think it's worth remembering that if a car hits a pothole, it can veer off the road and into pedestrians, so that's...
It's not about the car.
No, but the pedestrians, if they were hit by the car, would beg to differ.
It's about the roads.
I guess my concern is that we don't start stepping into the territory that Tom was referencing before, that we start filling those gaps that the reduction in government funding has thrust upon us, that just says, go ahead, keep cutting, we'll fill the gap like we have done for the last 20 odd years, And so we need to be very careful about how we reprioritise some of that work, but also to make sure that we don't fall out of what it is that we've said that we're going to do that allows us to qualify for the subsidy in the first place.
The only piece that I'd add to that is around the footpath renewals. The footpath renewals funding only came in from the Transport Agency, I think, in the last long-term plan. Prior to that, it was something that council had to fund its own footpath renewals. So that came in for a 3-year period, and then essentially that's been not eliminated but downgraded in this long-term plan. So we're a little bit closer back to what we were previously.
Tanya.
Kia ora. Mine is really around the comment made around vehicles and potholes. I mean, just this morning, I just want to give you an example. As I left Bluff, I passed between the entrance to the new wharf up to Fowler Oysters. I passed 7 trucks. And we're not talking wee trucks, I'm talking truck trailers, and there was only one single axle truck, which was a courier, and then there was a truck in front of me, and this here was just leaving Bluff. So, you know, I think, and as I moved on to Invercargill, I passed another 2 trucks that were coming to Bluff. So, I'm just wondering, you know, with the trucks and the size of these trucks must have some impact on our roads. Well, more so than our vehicles. So I'm just wondering where that sits, you know, around renewal, replacement, those sort of things. You know, for me, it's like bring back the rail. At least, you know, we could just train it down.
So
I'm
it's
not
just a
sure
comment.
what the
I don't
answer
think
is. I'm just saying that to me
comment.
is the problem for our roads between
Yeah.
Bluff and Invercargill.
Yeah, bearing in mind that Bluff Highway's a Waka Kotahi state highway, so sits outside of this brief. Okay, so can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report and then the recommendation through to council around the scope of work and improvement, noting that we're not stepping into the government's shoes that they vacated around funding. We're just holding airline and then are going to reprioritise our priorities, and we'll get a paper back around that. Thanks, Barry. Seconded, Trish. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Erin. Okay, we'll take item 10, now verbal update on the Dunedin Hospital, Mayor Clark.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick brief update. I've sent you all an email about the meeting I attended late last week. Where Dunedin's got to is it initially started off as $1.52 billion, and the Labor government, the costs increased, and the national-led government injected another 290 million, so we're up to 1.88 billion now. But the prediction is it'll head towards 3 billion, and so that's what the people in Dunedin have objected to. They've got a specialist manager in now with Health New Zealand, and he's looking at the costs. He's already found $300 million worth of cost savings. Don't know how he got that so quickly. So the cost of the build is looking like it'll be about 2 or 2.1, 2.2 billion. So it's not too far off what the government's currently saying. So trying to find some middle ground where government can put in another couple of $100 million and it will get over the line, but we don't quite have it yet. The issues are that some of the services may well be away from the new hospital. The government said that they might refurbish the existing hospital and utilise it up to about 25% of the space. We've had some debate about what could be away from the hospital. So good examples, I wore the hat as well of being the president of Southland Kidney Society, and dialysis services, as an example, don't need to be sitting in a hospital. They could be sitting in a house somewhere. It's just having the right sort of space. Where they are at the moment, the hospital is just terrible. But we couldn't get a regional push for the hospital, because we've got a couple of 3 councils that are not supportive of maintaining a first-class hospital in Dunedin, and those councils are Queenstown, Dunstan, and to a lesser extent Gore, because they all have their own push for more services, and they think if they believe in the minister's statement, Minister Bishop's statement, where he said that whatever we put into Dunedin, we'll have to take out of other hospitals by way of additional funding. So that's sort of divided the ranks a little bit. We've got 3 weeks left of a 4-week cycle, after which we'll know what the costs have come down to, and then by Christmas, Minister Bishop and Minister Reedy will make a decision about where to from here with the hospital. So the outpatients is just about built, but it's the inpatient block that's causing the problems. So we had a wide range of people at the meeting. We had Leslie will be able to help me, ex-chair of the Southern District Health Board.
Dennis Cairns.
No, more recent than that.
Pete Hodgson.
Yeah, and we had Mr. Thompson, who was did our review last term around the state of the council here. He's the chair of the Dunstan Hospital, and we had people like the National Nurses Union as well. So while they were helpful to have them there, they have much bigger pictures than what we're trying to deal with in Dunedin. They're looking at the overall health system. So that's where we've got to. We're probably 3 weeks away from knowing where this all lands.
Okay. Are you happy to take questions?
Sure, absolutely.
So from mine, what's the impact in terms of the service level of, so is there a reduction in hospital beds on the revised model?
No, it's where they're located, it's part of it. One of the things I fed back to the ministers when we were talking with them was to say that, I've obviously been in hospital recently for surgery on cancer and for open heart surgery, and every time I meet a specialist I say to them, why aren't you working in Australia, or why aren't you working at Tauranga or Auckland, why are you here, just to get a feel. And the common theme is one of 2 things. One is we like to peer group, which we can do in Dunedin Hospital. If in reality we were looking at the postcode issue, instead of having 6 or 7 cardiologists in Dunedin, you'd have 1 in Queenstown, 1 in Central, and 1 in Invercargill. But they don't like working alone, because when they're sick or on annual leave, there's no cover. And the other thing is they like working by the medical school because it keeps their knowledge up in respect to what's happening. So the beds are not being cut. It's at this stage the cut is to the physical building itself. It's a little bit like our museum. It's divided up into the build and then what goes into it. So there is some debate about PET scanners, and I don't know what a PET scanner is, but apparently there's 2 of them scheduled for Dunedin, and there's some suggestion maybe we get away with 1. But the issue was, Jules, who's the mayor of Dunedin, specifically asked the Minister Reedy, are all the services that are currently provided by Dunedin going to still be here, regardless of whether they're in the new hospital or not? And he didn't answer that, which is a bit of a worry, because the next place you'd go from Invercargill to get that would be Christchurch.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it was a little bit like the campaign they had some time ago, I think, or Leslie will remember, Save the Neurology Unit, or one of those things. So I think ministers were a bit scared by the turnout, which was 35,000 in the protest. So
okay.
yeah, I don't think there's a cutback of the actual volume of the services, just really the cost of the physical building itself is the issue.
Leslie?
Thank you. Just wanted to add in that don't believe all the financial figures that the current government is throwing around about the 3 million, etc.
Yep.
A lot of this is absolute.
3 billion.
Yeah.
3 billion.
3 billion.
Yeah.
A lot of this sudden 3 billion stuff is completely based on fudging the figures and adding in figures that were always completely separate from the new hospital rebuild. For instance, the biggest one of those is probably the new computer system, which Dunedin and the region was going to need anyway, and which was passed by the health board when I was a member of the health board. Totally separate cost. My understanding is that the current government is now acting as though that 150 million computer cost as part of the hospital bill that they're saying now has to be cut back. It's absolute nonsense. It's always a totally separate cost. There's a number of those costs like that. The PET scanner issue is a total red herring. There was only one PET scanner in the country until Christchurch got a second PET scanner. As part of the new Dunedin Hospital, it was seen as clinically responsible to consider putting a PET scanner in. That decision was never about 2 PET scanners going into Dunedin Hospital. So the sudden escalation of consideration of 1 PET scanner ending up at 2 PET scanners definitely being decided, and now we're going to cut them all together. Again, is just a nonsense argument. The other thing that I just want to warn everybody about is that this sudden concern from the current government over an escalation of costs at Dunedin Hospital and the possible downgrading of services is not only an attack on the whole region, because this, and you all know how passionate I am about Southland Hospital and Southland Hospital services, but the fact is Dunedin is a regional hospital. We will never have in Southland, in Gore, in Dunstan, all the services that are necessary. There will always need to be a regional hospital. We do not want our regional hospital to end up being Christchurch or, worst case scenario, Auckland for a selected range of issues, apart from the high level children's services, which I think everybody now accepts means that you end up at Auckland Children's. The neurology one, yes, they're preparing for another attack on neurology, and you'll suddenly find there's all this talk about a single neurologist, difficulties in recruiting a neurologist for this region, etc., centralising neurology on Christchurch. But the real big concern that I think a lot of people are not aware of is that this is not just an attack on the new Dunedin Hospital and the regional services it will provide. It is also an attack on the Otago Medical School. And I don't want anybody to think otherwise. This government has been clear that they would prefer a medical school to be in Hamilton. We are talking about the oldest medical school in this country, well established, well respected, absolutely codependent on having a decent hospital. I don't think anybody should forget that there is a sub-agenda here of Otago Medical School either being downgraded or being gone altogether, because this government has done a lot of talking about Hamilton being a preferred place for a medical school. They are not going to set up another medical school in New Zealand. They have decided to target Dunedin. The more they get away with downgrading the new Dunedin Hospital as a regional facility, the more they open the potential that the medical school is under severe threat. And quite frankly, for the region, not just for Dunedin, because let's face it, Dunedin has had years of depending on their university and the medical school. It is a core part of Dunedin, but it's also a core part of our region. Without that medical school sitting there, we will find even more difficulty in access to any specialist services. And we're not any longer just talking about the real high-level neurology stuff. We're talking about your heart stuff. We're talking about the kidney stuff. We're talking about all the attractions of specialists that a medical school, a long-established, respected medical school brings to a region. So I don't think anybody should just think this is something that the region can take lying down, or that there doesn't need to be significant protest. I think and I've said that to Nobby when we had a bit of a discussion, the parts of the region who are deciding that they won't join in a regional protest are being absolute idiots. They are not going to gain anything for Dunstan or Queenstown out of not being part of a protest,
Yep.
any money that the current government cuts out of here is going to go to the north. The climate at the moment is not one where they are going to reinvest any of that money in Queenstown or Dunstan or Gore for that matter. So I think they're being very foolish about losing the additional services of a major regional hospital with an attached, well-respected medical school, and thinking that they are going to gain anything from it, because they won't. That is not where this government intends to put any money they cut out. So I think every way that we can protest, every postcard that can be signed, every poster that can be put up, every indication that can be made that the region as a whole is angry about this, please do it. A few people approached me, and I know that they've approached Noppi, and I think they've also approached Tom about the idea of having a march in Invercargill. I think probably the time for a march in Invercargill has passed. I think now you would get a small enough turnout for it to look as though Invercargill didn't really care enough. I think the actual protest has got to be to keep up the momentum every way we can through media, through our own mayor, and at least the mayors of Southland and the Environment Southland Chair, putting out something as a mayoral forum.
Yeah. The other.
But I just don't want anybody to underestimate the damage that can be done by this sort of attack, because this is a once in 80 year project to get a decent hospital and a decent regional hospital in Dunedin. The more that they're allowed to cut out of it, the more they're allowed to say it's okay to refurbish a more than 50-year-old building that is no longer fit for purpose, and will never be fit for purpose, because it was not built for modern medicine at all. And I'm referring to the current Dunedin hospital. The more that they're allowed to get away with possible refurbishing, the more they're going to waste money that could be spent once and sensibly now by actually building the hospital that's committed to. And as I say, the sudden 3 billion figure that's being tossed around, please treat it with a large grain of salt. There are elements in that 3 billion, or you might even start hearing higher than 3 billion, that actually have nothing to do with the new hospital rebuild. They're the additional things like the computers that would have had to be brought into place anyway.
The other thing to remember
is it's mischievous.
That we didn't get any significant projects in the South Island around infrastructure, and we contribute, I think, 18% of GDP in Southland. So
Well, I mean, Leslie already knows this, but I mean, we've already got a capex claim in with the ministry for 2 more theatres, somewhere between 50 and 60 beds at Kew, and an upgrade to an ED department. Every time I ask the ministry where do we sit in the priority list, don't want to tell us.
It's gone totally off the radar. They don't want to even acknowledge that there is the need for investment at the moment in the south, and that's part of what's behind this.
I think the day that
we still have some things that haven't
the
been
day that Federated Farmers commit to a protest like this tells you an awful lot.
Yeah.
Yep, they really are. Biggest supporters of the National Party, and they're right in behind all this.
Well, they're apolitical, but
yeah.
Well, that's what they say. Yep. Anyway, thanks, Mayor Clark. So I think the message everyone will give you is keep fighting the good fight really, really hard, because it's really important to our region, and I don't think there's anyone that would disagree. So
just need to hook into that. What Leslie was saying, the electronic postcard that you can do, and you can put up to 250 words in here and use whatever language you like, and it just goes off to the minister.
And the more people that can send it, the better, because Ria will probably agree. The more of these indications that ministers get, the more serious it's taken. Don't think they're not effective.
So where do you
The
get...
Minister's office will be counting.
Where do you access
what
that?
they're getting.
Sorry?
Where do you access that electronic card, just for the listeners?
Well, it's on what's on Invers, I think, today. So we paid for that, council has paid for that. So you'll be able to pick up the 2 links, but if you're not, I can flick them on to you.
Nobby can send it round.
Yeah.
It's probably
Yep.
the easiest
Can
way
do
for
that.
everybody to pick it up.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
So is that on our own website as well?
Sorry?
Is everything on our own council website as well?
I've asked staff to do 3 things. 1 is what's on Invers, 2 is the Express, and 3 is to put it on our own website. Because it's got a logo, you know, they cut, we pay, or whatever the logo is.
On your laptop.
Yeah, so and it gives a lot of information, but it gives the 2 links that you want.
Michael.
Can I just say the quicker it's on our own website, the better,
Yep.
because
Yeah.
there are people
I think
who are
Michael's
looking-
going to talk to
who
it,
are
so
looking for that
do you want to talk to it, Michael?
happen.
Through yourself, Chair, if you're wanting it on the council website, we will need a resolution being passed by council here today. The reason it's not, it's gone through as a mayoral action in relation to the other components. If council wants it on, we can't use the logo until such time as council's approved it. So if you're wanting that, we would need a quick resolution on that verbal update.
So Ria, you keen to sort of word a resolution for that? As part of this verbal update?
Yeah.
Are you happy for that?
Approved of
Place the hospital protest post
on our
on its website.
Yeah.
Happy to suggest that we actually reconvene the meeting, because we're not actually in an official meeting at the moment.
Yes,
are
we
we?
are.
Yeah, we are.
We're
Yeah, we have.
closed, yeah. Can I ask a quick question, Chair?
Of course you can.
Thank you. Might I suggest or ask if you've considered getting in contact with Melissa Vining, because obviously the huge campaign with, they saw such a need with the failure of the health system here in Southland, that there's a Southland Charity Hospital now, and that's all been upstood by her and her husband and her family's efforts. So, I mean, she's obviously no stranger to a huge campaign. It would be really good to get her and their networks involved to help drive it.
Might blur her brand though, another hospital.
Right. Oh.
No, it'll be right. She'll be right.
I think
She'll be okay with it.
It's a bigger picture thing there. Yeah.
Look, I'm not technologically strong on this sort of stuff, but I mean, some people have got 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 friends on Facebook. I mean, it's easy enough just to click and send it. The more we get in, the more pressure it puts on. They weren't expecting 35,000 in Dunedin, I tell you.
No.
That really scared them.
Are you happy with that wording there? Okay, so
Can we suggest not just the logo, but and a link to
And links.
a link to the electronic postcard and any other official
The nurse's
materials.
petition is the other one.
Yeah.
Is there
Any other official materials should. Yeah.
Yep.
related
I've
to
got
Dean
the
Hospital.
links.
We got that, yeah. You happy with that, Michael? Yep. Okay. So I've got a mover in Ria and a seconder in Darren, Leslie. So all those in favour of receiving the verbal update and the committee requests staff place the Dunedin Hospital protest logo and links. Any other submission material on the council website? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Mayor Clark.
Yep, haven't finished yet. Just wait till you go. I'm just waiting for you to go off live stream.
So we have got public excluded. So I'll need a mover and a seconder, and the reasons for it just disappeared on mine. Okay, so we're moving into public excluded for the reasons of commercial sensitivity. So thanks, Darren, for moving. Seconded, Evelyn. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.